Hey family, welcome back to my video. Today we will see what if Harry Potter had Quirk. Before we start, I would like to extend my sincere thanks to the original author of this story for granting us permission to use it in our YouTube video. Your generosity is greatly appreciated. The author's creation and the original story's link in the descriptions, please do check that first. Now enjoy the video. It was a moment he'd never forget. Half-blood he might have been, but Severus Snape had known from very young just what a wizard's body was capable of. From extremely powerful magic to, in very rare circumstances, carrying a pregnancy. It had been one night. The moment of sheer madness, only to return to the same normality come the morning. Severus had hated him for it, but then, when that flutter of life brushed against his own magical core, he felt a mix of wonder and terror. He had to tell him. It was one night, and the smug pureblood bastard probably wouldn't care, but Merlin he still had a right to know. Even if Sirius fucking Black was a complete prat. Getting his attention was a task in itself. He and Lily still weren't speaking, and Slytherin didn't make a habit of waltzing up to Gryffindors for idle conversation. In the end a simple spell and note and he was set. It took an agonizing week before the bastard got back to him, of course, with an agreement they would meet at the Shrieking Shack of all places. Supposedly there was a way through from the Whomping Willow, and he had graciously given instructions. Paranoid, that was for damn sure. On the night he went to meet Sirius, Severus was almost 12 weeks into his pregnancy. He had even noticed that morning a slight curve to his middle, and wasn't that bloody terrifying. Thankfully the wretched pregnancy sickness had finally ceased, though the little monster within him had left him lighter by 7 pounds. Had to be black jeans. Brat. Even as he thought it, he patted his middle affectionately. Well past curfew, leaving the school was easy enough. It helped that the Slytherin rooms were in the dungeon. It made sneaking out less complicated. This late, no one really monitored the grounds, and if Dumbledore was watching, the man had a tendency to let things play out for his own amusement. Careful not to trip over his own feet, his robes barely keeping out the chill, Severus stopped at the edge of the Whomping Willow. Finding the knot at the tree's base was easy enough, and climbing beneath its roots, Severus was mindful of his middle. It was musty within the tunnel. The walls damp with mildew, and pushing hanging roots out of his way, Severus carefully made his way along the carved path. Of all the places Sirius wanted to meet, surely, they could have found a secluded spot in the school, or by the lake. But no, let's make it as awkward as possible. Have him walk roughly over a mile. Bored, unnerved by the silence, the teenager just thought up potion ingredients to memorize to keep himself distracted, and after what felt like forever, a light began to bloom at the end of the tunnel. Relieved, Severus picked up the pace. Personally, he was going to throttle Sirius for picking such a stupid spot, and he had barely stepped into the shack when a gut-wrenching growl filled his ears. Startled, Severus whirled around, ebony eyes whitening in horror, because there, stood with its hackles up, was a werewolf. Jowls wide, teeth bared, the animal lunged. Severus just about dodged and ran. There was no point in firing spells. Werewolf bodies were incredibly immune to nearly all magic. He was more likely to get killed in the attempt. Heart pounding, a whimper escaping him when he heard the unmistakable sound of the werewolf tearing after him, Severus forced his legs to move. Muscles screamed in defiance, his stomach churning. Whether from fear or the pregnancy he had no idea. All he knew was, he had to get away. The werewolf couldn't move as swiftly as he could through the tunnel. Probably the only reason he wasn't already dead, and when moonlight appeared ahead, the Slytherin almost wept with relief, dark eyes glowing white at the side of the entrance, where a frantic James Potter had just appeared. Fuck. Snape. Move. Hand outstretched, James watched the terrified boy run those final feet, and when that slender hand fitted into his, he yanked, pulling Severus free, just as the werewolf caught up and away from the furious strikes of the tree's branches. They must know. It didn't matter. The Whomping Willow kept the furious animal in close, the werewolf snarling in fury before turning and going back the way he had come. Remus. Sweet Merlin, it was Remus Lupin. Severus had known they were up to something, but a werewolf. Not once had that crossed his mind. Shaking violently, sprawled on the grass, Severus paled drastically and turned just in time to vomit spectacularly. Tears burned, his throat like fire, the heaving making his head thud horribly. Easy mate, easy. Don't touch me. Severus snarled. The minute James laid a hand on his trembling back. Don't snap at Jamie, it's not his fault. At that voice, Severus went rigid. Head snapping up, uncaring of the puke on his robes, or the tears tracking his rapidly flushing cheeks, the boy set livid ink black eyes on Sirius fucking Black. You nearly killed me. Us. Merlin, the baby. Shifting guiltily, Cyrus dragged a hand through his black curls in frustration. Remus is tame enough. Plus, it's hard to catch anything in the narrow tunnel. You'd outrun him. Merlin's pants serious. James hissed. It was a prank. Jamie, don't get your knickers in a twist. The prank. Severus sniffled, wiping furiously at the tears that were determined to fall. The idiot bastard could have killed him and didn't even see that. Getting up, his legs protesting a little, Severus stumbled, snarling angrily when James went to steady him. The Gryffindor had enough sense to back off, and refusing to look at the traitorous bastard Black, Severus turned to head back to the school. "I thought you needed to talk to me," Sirius called irritably. Closing his eyes, fresh tears blooming, Severus resisted the urge to curl up sobbing. "And not anymore," he forced out and kept on walking. The incident was brushed under the rug. Dumbledore made damn sure of it. Severus was silenced, unable to tell anyone about how Sirius had very well nearly murdered him and by extension his own child. 5 months later, having hidden his condition with great difficulty, he was gone home for the summer much to his misery, and by the time he returned for his final year, there was no baby to speak of, and Severus gave into the desperate despair tearing at his heart. "Sing me home." 30 years later. Pinching the bridge of his nose, Shota Aizawa tried to ignore the headache, irritating the hell out of him. The training exercise had gone spectacularly to shit, thanks to the odd misplaced quirk, and since the coffee machine had died this morning, he was running dangerously low on enough caffeine to keep him sane. It didn't help his number one problem child was acting strange, even for him. His face pinched and head clearly thumping worse than his. For the most part, Izuku Midoriya usually did well against these exercises. But today he had so far made 7 mistakes that were going to have recovery girl in a right snit. When 7 became 8, Aizawa called an end to the exercise. It took all he had not to rush over when Izuku landed and nearly ended up splat on the ground. There was a subtle tremor to his movements and a flush in his cheeks. Irritation gnawed at him, because clearly the stubborn brat was sick and had said nothing. 1A, clean up any mess you've made and head back to the dorms. Midoriya, Bakugo, Shinso, follow me. Katsuki would usually protest, but even he noticed something was off with the nerd. Yusu Aizawa, none of one questioned their teacher. The 3 teenagers followed him without fuss, back to the dorms and up to the shared apartment Aizawa kept with his husband and youngest. Deku. Cats. Tashi. Iri squealed in delight, dropping a thick red crayon, before clambering across it chuckling his ashi and reaching toward them. Big brothers. Grinning, Katsuki scooped her up, plopping her on his hip. "Hey little monster, you doing good?" "Aha. I'm coloring with Papa." Aizawa smiled fondly. Once upon a time, it had been just him and his ashi. But then on a cold night, when the moon was barely enough to illuminate a dank alley, he stumbled upon a sobbing 6-year-old Hitachi. The boy had been abandoned by his family for his quirk at right place, right time, because adopting the boy was the most obvious option. 9 years later Izuku joined their family after his mother was shockingly killed in the crossfire of a villain attack his first week at UA. It had been just over 7 months since her death, but he was a fighter, and, on the days it was too hard, he wasn't alone. Katsuki was the most recent addition. From the moment he had gone after Izuku with such fury, their first few days at UA Nezu had started an investigation. The teen's behavior was closely monitored, and by the time the dorms were erected, it was clear that the fiery blonde was being abused. Aizawa would never forget Mitsuki striking him in front of them that day. Saw the way tears filled Katsuki's eyes, even as he used anger to push it away. Within the month, he was adopted by Aizawa and his ashi. There were stumbles, but in an environment where it wasn't a case of constant fight-or-flight mode, Katsuki was adapting to a more mellow mood. Outside of the bubble of 1A, no one knew. But within 1A and the privacy of their own home, they were legally Hitachi, Katsuki, Izuku and Iri Aizawa, a happy family. "You're home early." Looking up at his slightly taller husband, Aizawa smiled at the sweet kiss pressed against his cheek. He was about to open up a whole lot of mother hen, but it was needed. "I think Izuku's sick." Sure enough, his ashi's head snapped around, green eyes locking on the shortest of their sons, taking in the flushed face, trembles, and glassy eyes. "Aizu. Baby." Head snapping up, Izuku blinked, grunting when his ashi suddenly swept him toward the couch and plopped him down. He was covered in a rainbow-colored blanket, and an old-fashioned thermometer popped in his mouth, before he could even process what was happening. "Is Deku sick?" Iri asked curiously, red eyes wide. "Looks that way," Katsuki commented. "Damn it nerd, I was blasting you to hell. You should have said you were feeling like crap." With the thermometer in his mouth, Izuku could only shrug. Glad when his ashi took the stupid thing out of his mouth. "I was fine, Kakin, just a little worn out, but in the last hour or so it's gotten worse." "I'm not surprised," his ashi winced. "You're burning up, baby. You temp is 103.4. Reckon, it's flu?" Hitachi asked. "It's going around." "Maybe." "Sho, we fever reducers in the kitchen, could you grab one?" Aizawa barely had a chance to nod, when Izuku let out a strangled cry, doubling over. Problem child vaulting over the couch, he dropped down next to his ashi, assessing the problem. "Kiddo. Talk to me, where does it hurt?" "It burns." Izuku whined. "F feels like I'm on F fire." "That's sho. He's getting warmer." His ashi spluttered. "Damn it. Cats, Tashi, get Iri out of here. I don't know if he'll lose control of his quirk." Nodding at Aizawa's order, keeping a wriggling eerie close, Katsuki bolted for their parents' back room, Hitachi on his heels. They were barely clear when Izuku let out an inhuman scream of agony, and raw energy exploded from him in a burst. "Sing me home." Slipping his feet into his shoes, Dumbledore shifted his tired body and shook off the dregs of sleep. Even with the heating charms, the cold of November was creeping in, making his old bones ache. They were coming steadily closer to the first task. The Triwizard Tournament, creating some stress with whoever had entered Harry's name into the goblet. It couldn't get any more complicated. Of course, famous last words. The sudden wash over his magic had Dumbledore whirling around, eyes locking on an amulet sat on his desk, pulsing with a multicolored light. Merlin's beard. He choked in a rare moment of astonishment before hurrying toward his desk. The amulet was something he had charmed some years ago, and it had several siblings. He had one, and the others he had given to friends including Nezu. He had met the odd animal some years ago on a trip to Japan. High up in the hero world, Nezu was one of the rare few aware of the wizarding community, and had volunteered to chaperone Dumbledore. Of course, that was more to do with the fact that the devious animal wanted to know all he could about magic. During their talks, they even theorized that Quirkless people were probably made up primarily of magical people or squibs, which in turn led to the amulet. A simple bit of magic, and he created identical trinkets that could pick up accidental magic from one, while channeling through to the other. The point was to see if any magicals were going unnoticed. It wasn't even the only one he had given out over the years, and yet not once had any alerted him. Each had a unique magical signature, so he knew it was Nezu, but where in Merlin's name had he come upon a witch or wizard in Japan? Their secrecy made Britons look non-existent. Even in regard to Muggle-born, so even giving him one had been a bit of a lark, because even he knew one going undetected was impossible. Summoning his patroness, Dumbledore relayed a message and sent the silvery phoenix on to retrieve Severus. The grumpy potions master wouldn't appreciate it this early, but he was the one Dumbledore trusted the most. As expected, Severus burst into the office minutes later, a scowl on his face. "What could you possibly need me for, Albus, at just barely 7 in the morning? Some of us like having food in us before dealing with troublesome children who refuse to pay attention." "The amulet is reacting," Dumbledore explained. Severus came up short, dark eyes widening in surprise. Dumbledore had once told him about the amulets, but they had never amounted to anything. "Where?" "Japan." "Japan," Severus spluttered. "Albus, they test children secretly on the day they are born to find those with magic, and whisk them away if they show any signs. And no newborn would be displaying accidental magic. So, how would a child circumvent the system?" Dumbledore winced. It was a testy subject, how the Japanese dealt with magic users. They believed magical children needed to be raised by magical families, and took it upon themselves to intervene. Since quirks had come to outweigh the numbers in recent years for Japan, such incidents in regards Muggle-born children were becoming rare, but still, it was a child removed from their family. "I honestly don't know, and the fastest way to find out is activating the amulet's built-in port key." Severus groaned. He was afraid of that. Pinching the bridge of his nose, he let out a rare profanity before giving in. "Fine. Merlin's balls. Let me at least have my classes covered. No doubt the little hellions will throw a party at my absence." Dumbledore smiled, blue eyes twinkling. "Thank you, Severus." Waving his thanks away, Severus stomped out to go retrieve Minerva and pack a few things. Something told him it wasn't about to be a brief trip. "Sing me home." Nezu stood at the bed of one of his students, carefully watching his pacing parents and frantic siblings, and had no idea what to say, because for all logic this shouldn't be possible. Magic. Young Izuku had magic. And if the crater-sized hole left in the one at dorms was anything to go by, it was extremely powerful magic. Toshinori was at a loss next to him. Unaware of magic, but knowing it wasn't one for all at work either. The fever still raged in the boy, his vitals up and down, and the recovery girl didn't dare intervene, when she had no idea what was causing it. Nezu doubted it would have helped and agreed, it ran the risk of making it so much worse. Every now and again, the green sparks of one for all sizzled across Izuku's skin, followed by a minor wave of energy that disrupted the machines. Thanks to his talks with Dumbledore, Nezu had long since learned how to shield them from being outright fried. "This is ridiculous." His ashi finally exploded, unable to take the waiting anymore. "Why aren't we doing anything? One of my babies could make it stop." "I can't," Chiu said softly, feeling utterly useless. "I've never seen anything like it, and if I don't know what's causing it, I could cause more harm than good." "Moving him to another hospital isn't an option either," Nezu said, paw grasping the pulsing amulet in his pocket. Furious that no one had come yet. "The energy waves are causing too much damage, and we've no idea if there'll be another one as severe." "Damn it." Katsuki snarled, red eyes narrowed. "There has to be cut off," by Nezu suddenly yelping and tossing a glowing stone on a chain. Katsuki moved to join his parents and brother. Yuri gripped his arms. "What the crap?" With a burst, 2 figures in strange clothing arrived in a blur. The heroes in the room were instantly ready to fight and defend, only for Nezu to stun them all. "Albus." Thank goodness. Nezu, the one named Albus, greeted jovially. It's been a long time, my old friend. This is Severus Snape, one of my Hogwarts teachers. Oh? Well, a pleasure to meet you. Rat. Aizawa snarled, drawing everyone's attention. Explain, now. Because it better involve helping my son. Luckily for all involved, they all could speak English. Severus's gaze snapped to the man, and his insides ran cold, because he was looking at the spitting image of Sirius Black, but with his eyes. His parents had never told him what became of the baby he gave birth to, and yet he had to know. Pulling his wand free, he cast a spell that would identify all the magicals and their family line present in the room. It was a credit to his patience that Aizawa didn't lose it, waiting for Nezu to sort out his damnable tea. The rat was calm as ever, and while playing host to the mystery men, the eraser hero kept stealing glances of the man who was his commie mother. Quirks were extraordinary things, and it was possible one allowed him the ability and Sirius. Who was that? Neither name was Japanese. His sons and husband sat next to Izuku's bed, just as wary. Chiyo had taken Eri out to find Imuri. If anything went wrong, no one wanted her caught in the middle. Tashinori also stood guard, just as wary of the newcomers. A sudden movement in Minfic tossed, Aizawa was in front of Izuku in under a second, glaring daggers at the old coot who called himself Albus Dumbledore. Back away from my kid. I mean no harm, my boy Albus promised, hands up placatingly. But your son is in need of aid, and it would be best if you let me examine him promptly. Shota Aizawa called over. They mean no harm. The sooner we know what's happening, the easier it will be to explain. We don't know them. Kasuki burst out, jumping up, red eyes wide. Don't let them. Kitty Cat Sazashi soothed, rubbing his back. No one is going to hurt Izuku. But we need to know what's going on. If Nezu says they're safe, then I trust him. Papa is right, Katsutashi said softly, keeping his tone low to also help soothe his adoptive brother. With a curse, Kasuki plopped back on the chair he had leaped out of. If any of them hurt the nerd, he was raining down hell. Reluctantly Aizawa stepped aside. With a nod of gratitude, Albus bent over the twitching teenager and carefully pulled out his wand. When he cast the spell, when he needed to examine a magical core, he was worried it would come back identifying the child as an obscurial, but what he got was an absolute miracle. Heart racing, he silently cast further spells, letting out a surprised laugh. Albus? Severus queried, frowning. What is it? A rarity, so much so, it's never happened before. Straightening, Albus's blue eyes were twinkling bright. That's it. Aizawa barked. Someone explain, now. Nezu sighed. From his understanding, this was a big secret, but since it was clear Izuku had magic and by the looks of it, Aizawa was from a wizard family, then he had leeway. Before quirks ever became a thing, there were still two species within humans. Your pre-quirk era powerless human and humans who possessed magic. Wizards and witches, though the Japanese tend to refer to them as magi. Then and now, they have lived secretly and independent of us, and as quirks became the norm, it became obvious that the remaining population of quirkless were magical, either being a magi, or simply possessing a dormant magical core. In Japan, either is confirmed secretly at birth. Now, that's thrown into question, because Izuku is presenting obvious signs of magic. That took a moment to process. Magic. Magic was real. Wait. Hisashi spluttered. As so how? Izuku is 16. Why now? Because the boy wasn't born with his quirk. Albus said excitedly. I could tell by the diagnostics, and clearly none of you are surprised by that revelation, which means he was born a squib. A child of a magical, but with his own magical core too weak to use, but that's changed. How? Aizawa demanded, ignoring what was clearly a derogatory term for non-magicals, and yes, all of them, plus Chiyo and a couple of others, were aware of how Izuku came upon his quirk. How has it changed? Because his quirk is acting like a battery. It has been gradually feeding his magical core, allowing it to mature fully. Albus gushed, beaming. Young Izuku is now a wizard. And this? Tashinori demanded, gesturing toward the teenager. We're barely keeping the fever under control. His body is trying to adapt to the sudden influx of magic, Albus explained. His quirk might be worsening it. My best suggestion would be to bring him to Hogwarts for our matron to tend to him. You're not taking him anywhere. Kasuki barked. Do you intend to control the waves of magic alone? Severus asked, interjecting calmly. It is rare, but not unheard of for children's magic to suddenly grow. Izuku is experiencing this, but tenfold, and if the bursts of accidental magic are in any way like others, he could destroy everything around him. The heroes winced. Albus raised a brow. I'm guessing it has already happened. Unfortunately, Nezu confirmed. Thankfully, no one is injured. Hogwarts is the school Albus is headmaster of. With Izuku's sudden magic, he is going to need training. Aizawa choked out a sound. You want us to just send him off to this school? He would be perfectly safe, Severus pointed out. I would see to it that my grandchild. Don't. Aizawa barked, hair snapping erect, eyes blazing red as he activated his quirk. I'm not interested in words from a mother who apparently threw me away. Threw you away? Severus croaked, face grinning. I intended to raise you. Loved you from the very moment I knew you existed, but I was 16, and my parents would hear nothing of it. They ripped you from my arms the day you were born. I had barely named you before you were gone. Hair falling, an old agony twisted inside Aizawa. I grew up in group foster homes unwanted, especially when my Quirk came in. I tried so desperately to find you at one time, but no one knew who you were. I had been dumped on the steps of a random foster home in Tokyo. Sever swore colorfully. That's why I could never find you either. I had assumed you were still in Britain, but my parents made sure you were nowhere to be found. Left you in the Muggle world to make it even harder. Doubtful they suspected you were a squib. Not with myself and your father being extremely powerful wizards. Nose wrinkling at yet another derogatory-sounding term, Aizawa figured he'd address it later. And Sirius Black. Is he related to Regulus Black? Brothers Albus quipped cheerfully. Aizawa barked to laugh. My adopted kid is actually my cousin. That is unexpected. He's going to get a kick out of this. This is insane, Hitachi breathed, grinning in delight. Actual magic. We are going to Hogwarts, right? If it'll help Izuku. Special circumstances can be allowed, Albus said hastily. Because they are your family and Izuku's family, they are allowed access to Hogwarts, regardless of Muggle status. We could manage their UA schooling between us, Hisashi pointed out calmly, slipping into Japanese for privacy. Nothing says they have to be right on the premises, and they've no internships coming up. Plus, it's a chance for you to meet your family show, and Izuku needs help. With a curse, Aizawa threw his hands up. Fine. We'll go. It was madness, but for once, he was at a loss, and had no idea how to help a student in pain, his own child in pain. Severus stood. If I may, I can give Izuku something to at least relieve the symptoms. Please. Katsuki begged. I hate seeing him hurting like this, please. Nodding his consent, Aizawa watched Severus produce a small vial and carefully lift Izuku's head, tipping the liquid into his mouth. Massaging his throat to help the boy swallow, Severus smiled when instantly the tense teenager went limp, his quirky activating as he finally relaxed. Oh, my baby, Hisashi croaked, green eyes damp. Thank you so much. Severus gave a nod. He should sleep comfortably for a few hours. It'll give us time to move him. I suggest you all go ready yourselves. Sing me home. It took a couple of hours to get everything organized, including laptops and hearing aids for Hisashi and Katsuki that magic couldn't interfere with. Between Nezu and Power Loader it was easily done, and a heart attack for Hisashi was avoided. No way the blonde could survive completely without tech. All set? Nezu asked cheerfully when everyone gathered, Aizawa carrying Izuku. As we can be, Aizawa replied dryly. You and Toshinori going to be okay explaining to everyone whatever excuse you're coming up with? Toshinori chuckled. We'll figure out something. Cementus is already working on repairing the dorm. We explained it away as a Quirk accident. Hitachi grinned impishly. Who's? Young Katsuki. Hey. Ready? Albus called jovially, interrupting the family, Nezu's amulet in his hand. I have reversed the port key to bring us back to England. Explain later, Aizawa grunted. I'll take it, it's magic again. Travel magic, Severus explained. If everyone is ready, each touch a part of the amulet. Saying a final goodbye to Nezu and Toshinori, they all lay a finger where they could, and barely had a second before the magic took them away. Never had any of them felt something so strange, and as quickly as it happened, it was over, the whole group landing none too gracefully inside a huge plush office. Up, Severus immediately went to the fire, tossing in flue powder, the flames blazing green. Come on, we best get Izuku to the infirmary. Through the fire. Hisashi spluttered. It's perfectly safe. Albus reassured. Just step in, say Hogwarts Infirmary, and it'll bring you there. Desperate to get Izuku help, Aizawa did as he was told, and, in all honesty, it was nowhere near as bad as traveling by that accursed port key. Stepping through, he heard a woman yelp. Spinning to face who he assumed must have been the matron. Hand on her heart, Madame Pomfrey was ready to start chucking spells, but refrained when barely seconds later Albus stepped through the fire, followed by Severus, a tall blonde man holding a little girl and two teenage boys. Albus Dumbledore. What in the name of Merlin is going on? My dear Madame Pomfrey, I will explain, but time is of the essence, Albus said, urging Aizawa to the nearest empty bed. I'll hold you to it. Madame Pomfrey barked, and assuming the unconscious child was her patient, she immediately produced her wand and ran a diagnostic. Magic was a wonderful thing, and the spell could tell you everything. What she wasn't expecting was to be told the child was suffering a magical overload due to a magical core suddenly activating. How is this possible? By a miracle, Albus said cheerfully. Severus has given him something to ease the pain. But I felt it prudent to have him in your care for monitoring. Can you tell how long his core will take to stabilize? Flummoxed, Madame Pomfrey checked the readout from her wand. Given this several hours. By the morning. It's hard to gauge it accurately, with what I'm assuming is his core causing interference. So, we wait? Hitachi asked, looking between them all. I would suggest we show you where you're staying, Severus suggested. As expected, there were instant protests. There's a lot to discuss, and Madame Pomfrey can place a spell to alert Izuku is waking and send us word. It will also be safer, Madame Pomfrey pointed out. Core stabilization can get dangerous for others if he has bouts of accidental magic. Aizawa was reluctant to leave him, but after what his magic had done to the one at dorms, it was the safest option. Saying goodbye to Izuku, the worried family followed Albus and Severus back through the green flames to Albus's office. Oh? Yuri gushed, the first sound she had made since arriving, red eyes latching onto a stunning bird, sat on a perch. His plumage a glorious fiery mix. He's so pretty. Albus smiled at the child. His name is Frox. He is a phoenix. Phoenix are real. His Ashi blustered. You'll find a lot of magical creatures are real, Severus supplied, a small smile on his lips. You never introduced your husband to children. Aizawa resisted the urge to roll his eyes, and point out he had said their names several times in front of him. He knew it would be childish. This is my husband Hisashi Yamada. Our other children, Hitachi, Katsuki and Iri. So, what now? Katsuki grunted, pacing agitatedly. Now, I think it's time to summon Sirius, Black Albus voiced calmly. Are you insane? Severus demanded, whirling to face the elder wizard. Sirius has no idea about this. The man will gut me. Better to face him now, Albus responded cheerfully, scooping up more flue powder and tossing it into the fire, calling out the last known address Sirius had supplied him, and popped his head through to ask the man to come through. A moment later, Sirius stepped out of the fireplace, both confused and panicked. Had something happened to Harry? Albus, what's the words died in his throat, grey eyes glowing wide when they settled on a man that could easily pass as his doppelganger, albeit a couple of decades ago. But it was the eyes, the ebony eyes that had his head snapping toward Severus, his complexion a shen. The night when I fuck. Snivelis. Aizawa saw the minute his well-father pulled out his wand. His gaze was livid, and he knew from watching the other wizards that the man was about to use a spell. By his rage, it wasn't going to be of the friendly sort. Lunging in front of his mother, just as Sirius bellowed, a burst of light shooting toward him, Aizawa activated his Quirk on instinct, and just like a quirk, the magic was instantly cancelled out. Panting, Sirius tried again and again and again, but his magic was completely blocked. Save it, Aizawa barked, capture scarce shifting. He'd use it if the idiot decided on his fists. Your magic is shut down, and I'll keep it that way until you decide to act like a damn adult, instead of scaring the hell out of a 7-year-old girl. Rage suddenly forgotten, Sirius finally noticed the other occupants, including a small silver-haired girl, clinging like a koala to an ash-blonde teen who was glaring murderously at him. Explained, Sirius croaked, grey eyes growing suddenly wet as the implications hit him smack in the head. Merlin. Did you hate me that much? You'd hide my own kid from me. Don't, Severus spat. I attempted to tell you and you took that as an opportunity to nearly get me killed. It was a prank. You tricked me into walking right into the jaws of a werewolf. Severus snapped. After 30 years, stop excusing it. You're damn well old enough to know the severity of that stunt. So, what, as revenge, you raised him all these years and said nothing? Severus shook his head, misery engulfing him. My parents, they interfered. Had him sent away to Japan of all places, hours after his birth. I found him just hours ago. I had named him H, had every intention of keeping him, even telling you, but they stole him from me. My poor baby. Releasing his quirk, Aizawa watched his mother hold himself together. After being left to a cruel childhood, it was so strange, yet warming. You named him? Sirius asked, damp eyes looking Aizawa up and down. What name did you give him? Canis Aquilius Black. Laughing, Sirius nodded. A good name, but I'm guessing from the quirk you clearly just used, kiddo, it wasn't kept. No way they'd let a squib keep such a pureblood name. Aizawa rolled his eyes at that term again. My name is Shota Aizawa, and since you've calmed down, this is my husband Hisashi and 3 of our children, Hitachi, Katsuki and Iri. Our 4th, Izuku, is in your infirmary. I'm a granted, Sirius croaked. Merlin's pants. Iri giggled, the strange saying funny to the little girl. Her English wasn't quite as fluent as her parents or brothers, but she understood enough. She smiled shyly at Sirius when he looked at her. So, reunion aside, what's going on? Sirius questioned. Something tells me there's a lot more to this. They told him everything. About how Izuku had manifested magic, how Albus had alerts in place to find children with magic. How they used the built-in portkey to go to them and found Aizawa by complete accident, and the last bit of news almost brought Sirius to his knees. Your adopted kid Izuku is the son of my younger brother. Croaked the wizard, looking at Aizawa. He's my nephew and your cousin. Aizawa nodded. A surprise, one he'll no doubt enjoy once he's awake. So, what now? Sirius questioned. Will Izuku be enrolled? That's the plan, Aizawa said with a nod. For now, we intend to get them settled, Albus explained. If you would follow me, I have the perfect spot in mind. Sing me home. Waking wasn't the most pleasant of experiences, but then Izuku had woken from far worse things. What made this tremendously more so, he had absolutely no idea where he was. Lunging upright, green eyes darting about, he knew he was in some sort of hospital, but the rest didn't make sense. He was in a castle. There were sconces lighting up the room. Windows several feet high, overlooking what was clearly part of a castle courtyard. Heart racing, Izuku tried desperately to remember what had happened. There had been pain, so much pain. He had felt as if he had been burning from the inside out, and now, other than some muscle aches, he felt completely fine. In fact, he felt fantastic. At some point, someone had changed him into his sleep clothes. Just a long-sleeved tee and worn, but comfortable pajama pants. Hearing a noise, Izuku's head snapped around and panicked. He scrambled from bed, using one for all to speed up his movements. To his relief, the doors were wide open, and no one was blocking his escape. The moon was up. It had to be late. Where were his parents? His brothers? They were landing on bare feet, several halls away from the infirmary. Izuku tried to find a way out that didn't involve him smashing a damn window. Months of training and some serious instincts had him moving a moment later, just in time to avoid a stone axe. What the hell? I would like to know the same thing. Spinning around, Izuku found a man stood, face twisted in anger and blue eyes blazing, a stick of all things pointed at him. It seems Hogwarts has an intruder. English. He was speaking English. Extremely heavily accented English, but English nonetheless. Scowling, Izuku realized the statue wielding an axe wasn't alone. From all around him, they shifted, gray stone grinding. Was it his quirk? He had never seen a quirk like it, and what was Hogwarts? The movement of that stick, and Izuku just barely dodged the next swipe. Landing with a grunt, he activated one for all again, green sparks blazing all along his body, and with a practiced leap and spin, he drove his bare foot into the head of the nearest statue, smash. Screaming out in his head as it exploded on impact. Pain rippling through him, his foot no doubt bruised, but considering the damage he had often done, mild contusions were nothing. Landing, he slid, green eyes never leaving his attacker. What the hell is this? Izuku seethed. I haven't done anything. You're not a student at this school. The stranger hissed. Nor of those visiting. So, that makes you an intruder. I was unconscious. Izuku snapped. I don't even know where here is. And attacking like this is a bit damn much. You dare speak to your elders like that? Insolent brat. Izuku jumped when another statue lunged. The stone arm hit him dead on, and even with one for all, he was caught so off guard, he couldn't stop it. Launched like he weighed nothing, his body collided with a huge set of doors, and though it hurt like a bitch, the impact was lessened when they sprang open. He barely had a chance to register startled shouts, blinding light, before his body hit solid stone and tumbled until he crashed into a table with a resounding thud. Dizzy, body throbbing, Izuku felt blood on his temple, the red spilling down over his cheek like blood-soaked tears. You're Merlin. Merlin's beard. Karkaroff, stop you lunatic. Dragging himself upright, Izuku cried out when his right leg buckled. Damn it. His right ankle was broken. Eyes focusing, he was startled to see hundreds of kids looking at him, from 4 long tables all dressed strangely, and with those candles floating above his head. In front of him, adults stood, some of those same sticks being held out toward his attacker Karkaroff. Did one of them call him? The man stood by the doors, his stone comrades either side of him, his blue eyes narrowed to slits. The boy is no student of any of our schools. How else should you deal with an intruder, Albus? Not by assaulting a 16-year-old boy. Albus bellowed in fury. Last warning, Karkaroff. Stand down. With a reluctant curse, Karkaroff dispelled the statues, sending them back to where he had summoned them from. With the danger seen too, the adults converged on Izuku. With a grunt, he scrambled away from them, screaming when it jostled his broken leg. Izuku, stop moving. Tearful green eyes snapped up toward the man, Albus whitening in surprise. How had he known his name? And then the most beautiful tone rang out, flooding Izuku with immediate relief. Why in the crap is my brother beat to shit? Severus should have known Albus would do this, but he couldn't say he wasn't secretly delighted. The quarters he had in mind had been Severus's own, and thanks to Hogwarts being her sentient self, the school had already expanded, creating several new rooms that, to his son and his family's surprise, had mimicked larger versions of the bedrooms each of them were used to. Magic is awesome. Hitachi laughed, purple eyes taking in the stunning pink bedroom, set up for a positively delighted Eerie. Hogwarts has also taken it upon herself to create a room for Sirius. Albus added. What? Severus spluttered. Explain to me why I'm housing Black in my quarters. Albus shrugged. So, he can get to know his son and grandchildren also. Surely the both of you can play nice, for that at least. Sirius would rather pitch himself off the astronomy tower, but he desperately wanted to get to know his grandkids. I'll behave if Snivelis does. You might want to try that without the derogatory name calling Aizawa snarked, irritably. My students have more sense. Alessio Katsuki and Izuku Hitachi pointed out dryly. Bite me? I bags, Katsuki griped in retort. The nerd and I sorted our shit, and since we're minors at least we have an excuse. Grown adults, not so much. Severus and Sirius both flushed. The pair thoroughly scolded and didn't say much else, while Albus explained how Hogwarts operated in regards ever needing anything. The castle is very intuitive, Albus continued cheerfully. Need an extra room and she'll have it conjured before you finish the thought. As for food and laundry, our schoolhouse elves will assist you, and I will offer you one of our elves for your personal use, Romy. With a crack, Romy appeared, the tiny creature blinking when an ash blonde jumped with a howled, "What the crap?" Ignoring him, she lifted luminous eyes toward Albus. Headmaster be needing Romy. Yes, Romy, these are Severus's son Shota Aizawa, and Mr. Aizawa's husband and children. You will be serving them for the foreseeable future. Serving? Hitachi frowned. We're perfectly able to look after ourselves, without you giving us a slave. Romy squawked, looking thoroughly affronted. Should you be needing, Romy call. When she popped away, Hitachi winced. I insulted her, huh? House elves tie themselves to wizards and witches, Severus explained. It's not fully understood why, but it is better for them in regard to their magic and life force. In return, their purpose is to serve. More because they want it, not because we enforce it. There are some that don't treat them right, Sirius admitted. But for the most part they are, and all they want is to serve. Honestly, try and free one, the meltdown isn't pretty. Hizashi chuckled. For the most part, we can take care of ourselves, but with 3 rowdy teenagers and a 7-year-old, I'm not about to refuse extra help. We also have a tournament at the moment, Albus explained. The Tri-Wizard tournament, and because we're the host school we're a lot busier than we normally are, and until you learn your way around, do not wander about the school without one of us with you. As we've mentioned, the castle is sentient, and she can be mischievous. That doesn't sound like a disaster waiting to happen, where problem child number 1 is concerned, as always sighed dramatically. And as for Izuku, how is this going to work? At 16, he has already missed 6 years of magical training, Albus pointed out. But the problem here is the fact he suddenly has a fully grown magical core for his age. Go too simplified, and his magic may be too strong. Like using a low-grade battery to channel several thousand volts of electricity, Katsuki said, immediately seeing the problem. Too much, and all you're getting is him frying everything, and if his quirk is feeding his core, that's boosting him again. Aizu is smart, Hitachi added. Crazy smart, he'll pick up anything pretty fast once given the materials. Which is why I was thinking of placing him with our 4th years, Albus said with a warm smile. Not too far down in grades for his magic, and I plan to pair him with one of our most studious to catch up. Not Hermione Granger, Severus groaned. For Merlin's sake, Albus, you'll have my grandson's ears leaking grey matter. Sirius sparked to laugh. That girl sounds like she ate every book and more from the last 4 years. She'd be a perfect candidate. Hizashi laughed. Oh really? Sounds like our Izuku. The two will get on fine. Could we meet her? Severus rolled his eyes. Go on. The more the merrier. Chuckling, Albus called out. Toffee. The pop and a male house elf appeared, bowing respectfully. You be needing me, headmaster. Yes, Toffee, could you retrieve Miss Hermione Granger for me? Albus asked politely. Right away, headmaster. Toffee popped away, delighted by the task. The group barely had a second to wait before he was back, a startled Hermione in tow, eyes wide and clutching her book bag. Professors. Miss Granger. Thank you, Toffee, that'll be all. Come, sit. Watching the elf pop away, Hermione glanced over the unfamiliar adults and kids in confusion. She noted Severus and Sirius. Why are you? She startled because who she was staring at was too young to be serious. What's going on? Oh, kiddo, Sirius said, drawing her attention to where he had gotten comfy in an armchair. It's a long story. Oh, for crap's sake. Hermione jumped, eyes snapping toward the tall, muscular blonde with a silver-haired girl on his hip. Severus and Sirius fell into bed, and neither idiot seemed to know what a condom was. 9 months later, Canis Aquileus Black was born, later dumped on the doorstep of a Japanese orphanage, and renamed Shota Aizawa. Fast forward 30 years, where he's a non-magical, married and has 4 adopted brats. One of which is in your infirmary, because of his magical core suddenly activating. He needs to train his magic, with a side order of tutoring, and that's where you come in, Curls. Sirius blinked, laughing heartily. What my grandson said is the basic gist of this insanity. The rest can be filled in at a later date. Questions? Oh, she had a fair few, but presumed most wouldn't be answered. Wait, tutoring. Cheeks pinking, Hermione sat completely flustered. You want me to help catch him up? Why? Surely there are others. None quite as studious, Albus returned cheerfully. Though Izuku is 16, we'll place him in 4th year. It will be quite the workload for him, but I believe with your help, Miss Granger, he'll manage. But where would I even start? We're not expecting you to act like a teacher, Miss Granger, Albus promised her. And you don't have to do it, if you do not wish. We just want you to assist him. No different to how you would your friends. Besides, Curls, Katsuki butted in, with a grin. This is Izuku we're talking about. The nerd eats information. I give him a month and he'll be caught up to your 4th year with ease. Hermione's gaze sharpened. My name is Hermione. Don't take it personally, Hitachi laughed. Katsuki likes nicknames. Shut it, eyebags. You, see? And I'm the hot hat's brother, Hitachi grinned. I'm Hitachi, grumpy here's Kasuki, and our little sister Yuri. Lifting her head, Yuri's red eyes landed on Hermione. She was curious about the girl. Silver hair shifting, her horn became noticeable. Oh? Hermione gasped. You have quirks. I have read theories about quirks maybe growing from magic, with so many squibs being bred into the lines. Fascinating really. And Izuku has both. Keeping it serious over that revelation, Hermione was positively giddy. From what she had read, that it never happened before and honestly shouldn't even be possible, and yet here this boy was. I'll help. Hermione beamed. As best as I can, I'll help. Perfect. Albus grinned. We'll have to have him sorted as soon as he's able. Sorted? Hisashi questioned. Hogwarts has 4 houses, Hermione explained. Gryffindor for the brave, Slytherin for the cunning, Hufflepuff for the kind, Ravenclaw for the clever. Aizawa chuckled. Izuku could fit into any of those houses. How do you decide? Hisashi asked curiously. A test or something? No, Hermione laughed. We have the sorting hat. It delves into your personality and decides where you'll best thrive. How boring, Kasuki grunted. Hogwarts has enough excitement, Hermione pointed out. At least have the sorting be easy. They talked for a bit, catching Hermione up on the whole thing, listening to her squeal in delight when she realized Aizawa and Hisashi were the pro heroes Eraserhead and present Mick, as well as Kasuki, Hitachi and Izuku being provisional heroes. Eventually, she was sent back to class, while Aizawa and his family went to lie down. They were still on Japanese time. Severus stuck to his quarters, partly to watch his family, but mostly used the time to talk to Sirius. Eventually, the pair nodded off in the living room, only to be abruptly woken when Madame Pomfrey sent a frantic message. Izuku was missing. Sing me home. As always impatient, especially when it came to his family, Kasuki rushed ahead to find Izuku. They should have realized this. Of course, he'd freaking run in unfamiliar surroundings. They had been through enough crap to be instantly suspicious of what they didn't know. The ground suddenly rocked beneath his feet, the blonde teen stumbling, red eyes locking on a corridor. Someone was under attack. Damn it, nerd. You better be in one piece. Hands sparking, Kasuki propelled himself forward and landed next to a mess of stone. Hearing shouts, he leaped over a large piece of statue and found himself at the doors of a huge room, filled with kids. Eyes zeroing in on the only person that mattered, fury bloomed in his chest. Why in the crap is my brother beat to shit? Stalking forward, red eyes blazing, Kasuki's gaze locked on a familiar face. Curls. What the hell is going on? A misunderstanding. Hermione squawked, ignoring the looks of her stunned friends and classmates. Oh yeah. Well, I want the name of this misunderstanding. Kasuki barked. Kakin. Fury thawing, Kasuki rushed toward his brother and fell to his knees next to Izuku. He paled at the sight of the smaller teen's ankle. Swollen, deformed, it was already turning a hideous black and purple. The bruises splashed over his foot, ankle and climbing up his leg. Shit. This is a bad break, nerd. I noticed, Izuku responded dryly. What is the meaning of this madness, Dumbledore? A woman shrieked, having had enough of the chaos. Karkaroff says the child is an intruder. Care to explain what he is, if not what Karkaroff claims? We were invited here. Kasuki barked, eyeing the insanely tall woman. Back off. Insolent brat. Karkaroff spat, stalking forward, only to yelp when he was suddenly tackled and pinned down, his arm wrenched back painfully. You know, Aizawa drawled, ink black eyes noting his surroundings, and not being remotely gentle with the idiot beneath him. It might have been a good idea to tell the occupants of the castle we were here, right, Dumbledore? That way my kid wouldn't be bloodied or have a broken ankle. Hair snapping up, his eyes blazed red momentarily, before settling back down. Albus winced. An error in judgment, my dear boy students. Staff and guests. I would like you to meet Shota Aizawa, son of Severus Snape, and these are 2 of his children, Kasuki and Izuku. Izuku has been enrolled in our prestigious school as of this morning. Wait, what? Izuku blustered, ignoring the startled words of the students, because honestly, he hadn't a clue about any of it. What is he talking about? Well, that's one way to do it. Aizawa grumbled, getting off of Karkaroff with one last kick before making his way toward his children. Crouching, he cursed colorfully in Japanese. Damn it, this is weeks of a bad injury. A magic. Izuku croaked, green eyes wide. What how? Simple as terms. Aizawa started, carefully prodding at the limb and speaking low enough for his son's ears only. Magic was about years before quirks. Now quirks are more dominant, with the theory supposedly that those who are quirkless are born of magicals, and either end up wizards and witches or have an undeveloped magical core, leaving them sort of in limbo. You ended up being both. What? Well done, nerd, Kasuki said cheerfully. Once again an overachiever. Prefects. Albus called out. Since dinner has ended, I suggest leading each of your houses back to their respective common rooms. Minerva, could you please retrieve Madame Pomfrey? I think it would be better not to move young Izuku until his ankle is mended. Mended? Izuku blinked owlishly. You can just fix it. Albus nodded. Absolutely, my dear boy. Wait and see. By the time a flustered Madame Pomfrey hurried in with Minerva, Hisashi, Hitachi and Severus right behind her, the students were all gone, and Izuku was in a great deal of pain. Hisashi took one look at his child and let out a snarl. Which one of you robe-wearing idiots did this to my kid? The idiots shook the very room, Hisashi's quirk boosting the word and rattling the windows. Green eyes zeroing in on Karkaroff, all but feeling the guilt coming off him. Hisashi was ready to lunge, but Aizawa stopped him, speaking quickly in Japanese. Forget him, Zashizu needs us and he's not worth it. With a last glare at Karkaroff, Hisashi went to Izuku crouching down. Easy baby, bet that hurts. Had worse, Izuku grunted shakily, watching Madame Pomfrey's every movement. The young man Madame Pomfrey grimaced. I'm going to have to set this bone before I heal it, or it will mend crooked. I can give you something to numb it, but I'm worried about the weakening pulse of the foot. It would honestly be better to just do it fast. Sweat glistening on his cheeks, Izuku nodded. Oh okay, do it. Could you keep him still? She asked Aizawa and Hisashi, who immediately went either side of the teenager. And the rest of you, back up, I don't know if his magic will lash out. Severus was livid. His grandson, and wasn't that still a shock, was grey with pain, all because Karkaroff was a violent moron. The minute Madame Pomfrey snapped that bone back into place, Izuku's inhuman scream left everyone shaking. The matron worked fast, casting spells to heal the break, until the foot and ankle were good as new. Her one flying over every scrape, bruise and a deep cut in his temple. Panting, Izuku's head lolled onto Hisashi's shoulder. Easy baby, you're doing so well. The worst is over. Smiling, Madame Pomfrey produced 2 vials. Here, a pain potion for the lingering aches and blood replenisher. The latter should perk him right back up. I've healed all his injuries. Thank you, Aizawa said, taking the potions and coaxing them into a drowsy Izuku. Albus, I suggest you and Severus catch us up immediately. Minerva demanded irately. Before Karkaroff assaults any more children. Albus nodded. I'll have the house elves send up tea, this is going to take some explaining. Sing me home. Hermione had barely set foot in the Gryffindor common room when she was accosted by nearly every member of her house. Hermione. Katie Bell gushed, eyes glittering. Who was that gorgeous blonde? That body would put Crumb to shame. Curls. He called you Curls. Angelina squealed. Just how intimate are you with this guy? Cheeks flushing, Hermione stuttered. It's not L like that. What about the kid with green hair? Just as gorgeous. Another girl added. And he's being enrolled. I hope he's in Gryffindor. They're Snape's. A 6-year boy snapped out appalled. Or are you going to ignore that part? Oh, knock it off, Smith. Being a Snape isn't a reason to condemn them. Especially when Sirius was clearly involved. Jumping at the whisper in her ear, Hermione looked back at Harry and shockingly Ron. The pair hadn't spoken in weeks, but this was clearly big enough to knock some sense into them. With the other Gryffindors distracted, the trio hurried upstairs to the boys' dorms, grabbing the privacy where they could. Hermione. Harry immediately rushed out. Dumbledore introduced that man as a son of Snape. But he's the spitting image of Sirius. What the hell is going on? Chewing her lip worriedly. Well, some male wizards can get pregnant. It's a rarity one Snape apparently possesses. He's the bloke's mother, Ron cackled. Merlin. That's bloody brilliant. So, Sirius is the father? Harry demanded, catching on. Hermione nodded. A once-off. Snape never told Sirius and his parents forced him to give the baby up. They literally just found each other hours ago. Merlin, Harry croaked, sinking onto his bed. Sirius will lose his mind over this. Sirius knows. Dumbledore brought him here to tell him. What? Incredulous, Harry leaped up. He's here in the castle. Is Dumbledore insane? He's confined to Snape's quarters and only allowed out in his dog form. Hermione pointed out. Besides, you didn't see him, Harry. He was lit up. Absolutely delighted with being a father and a grandfather. Harry could understand that. Going from being alone to a whole family. Yes. He definitely understood that, Troy. Is this why that house elf suddenly kidnapped you outside Charms today? Hermione's cheeks burned. Yes. Honestly, you think Dumbledore could summon his student a little less dramatically? Why you? Ron asked curiously. You think it'd be Harry they'd look for? Because of the green-haired boy, Izuku. His magic only manifested this morning. Before that, he was a squib. What? Hermione rolled her eyes at the joint holler. It's as I said, Izuku was born a squib. Now it's been theorized, the remaining quirkless are either all squibs or magicals, with some squibs developing a quirk, or getting neither. In Izuku's case, his quirk has acted like a battery to his undeveloped core, allowing it to mature. Izuku is now the first known wizard with a quirk. Bloody hell. Ron laughed. That's insane. But what has that got to do with you? Dumbledore doesn't want him starting as a first-year, Hermione explained. His magical core is that of the 16-year-old he is, so the professor is worried his magic would just overpower low-level spells. But nor does Dumbledore want to overwhelm him with 6th year. So, he'll be placed in 4th year, and I was asked to help him with catching up. Oh, you love that, Ron chuckled. I wonder what house he'll be in. His brother said any house would suit after I explained how they work, Hermione said with a grin. But I think it'll be Gryffindor, since both his parents are pro-heroes, and he and his brothers are provisional heroes from UA. Pro-heroes were known even by the wizarding world, as was UA Harry, and Ron had often debated their favorite heroes amongst the English agencies, and of course, everyone knew about the top Japanese heroes in their most prestigious school. No wonder the two of them were ridiculously fit, Ron commented. Hero training makes learning magic luck easy. How do you know that? Harry asked. Flushing as red as his hair, Ron shrugged sheepishly. I might have gone through a phase of wanting to be a hero and moving to Japan to go to UA. Harry grinned. Had similar dreams, but when I turned 4 and no Quirk appeared, had to forget it. Hermione sighed with relief. Just like that, the previous argument was forgotten, and the two boys fell into talking about heroes. By the time she bid them goodnight, they were on Harry's bed, laughing heartily, all forgiven. Sing me home. The next morning, Izuku followed his, grandmother he supposed, to the Great Hall. His new family was certainly going to take some getting used to. It had taken a couple of hours to explain everything to him, and once he got his head around it, the headmaster had called in a few favors. Which was how he ended up spending till midnight being fitted for robes and testing wands after a witch and a very peculiar wizard made a castle call. The one choosing certainly had been the experience. After being rejected by nearly 200 wands, the wizard Ollivander had suddenly rushed back through the fire and returned 5 minutes later, with an old wand box clutched in his hands, saying he had gotten it on a trip to Japan many years ago. Made from cypress wood, it contained 9 strands of kitsune tail hair, one from each tail, and according to Ollivander, was the only wand of its kind. Izuku wasn't expecting anything, and yet to his shock and Ollivander's elation, the unique wand chose him. As for classes, he was taking the main core subjects, and would use the first month to sample electives, until he decided which two he wanted to do. For now, breakfast and sorting. A lot of curious eyes followed Izuku as he walked behind Severus, feeling ridiculous in his school robes. He was told once his house was chosen, they would magically alter to represent it. Silence fell the closer they got to the top table. Albus waited with a ragged-looking hat on his stool and a smile. Have a seat, young man. Shyly, Izuku waited until Albus lifted the hat and took a seat. He barely had a chance to take note of all the gawking eyes, before his vision was blotted out, the sound gone. Well, this is new. Izuku jumped. Severus had explained how the sorting hat worked, but it was a whole other thing actually hearing it. Ahai, he thought back. I've seen some courageous minds in my time, but this beats them all. You have such a thirst to be the best you can be, there's cunning too, oh yes, and such intelligence. Then this kind heart, where to put you. Don't think I didn't notice the others, but this is not about them. Izuku's heart gave a jolt. Why, you can hear them. Somewhat, it is not quite their time yet. For now, you must learn this new part of yourself, and for that you will do best in Gryffindor. Taking a seat, Izuku absently inspected the changes to his uniform. The red and yellow had appeared immediately after the sorting hat had declared his house, and he was fascinated. Aware of everyone staring at him, the teenager flushed and gave an awkward wave. Hi, I'm Izuku Aizawa. He was safe to use his legal name here. You're Snape's grandchild, so? An older teen sneered. Rough one, mate. Don't be a prat, McLagan. A red hat barked before smiling and greeting. Welcome, Izuku. I'm Ginny Weasley, I'm a 3rd year. This is my brother Ron and his friends Hermione Granger and Harry Potter. They're 4th years, I heard that's where they're placing you. Izuku nodded. Yippee, Professor Snape gave me my schedule this morning. We have one of the electives, first care of magical creatures. Such a class to start with. Jumping, Izuku turned and blinked. Stood behind him was a slender blonde, with silvery gray eyes and an extremely haughty expression. He reminded him somewhat of Shota, but when Shota was still going through his Ice Prince, I hate the world phase. Shove off, Malfoy, Ron barked irritably. No one asked you. Sneering, Malfoy held out his hand toward Izuku. The name is Draco Malfoy, and considering who your family is, you do well to pick the right friendships. Green eyes whitening a fraction at the name, Izuku couldn't help but laugh. His whole body shook with mirth. Prickly, Draco dropped his hand, silver eyes narrowed. And what, pray tell, is so humorous? Well, for one, we're technically family. Izuku responded cheerfully. Cousins, actually. What? The Malfoys aren't related to the Snapes. Izuku shook his head. Neither am I, technically. I'm adopted, my magic comes through the black line. Regulus Black specifically. Supposedly, he was my birth father. Several jaws dropped at that little revelation. He had spent quite a while talking about it with Sirius. Finding out he was Aizawa's cousin by blood was rather amusing, and it was fascinating to learn the family had known he existed thanks to a magical tapestry, but no one knew where he was. You're Merlin. Draco gasped. Why, your Cygnus Orion Black. They have looked for you for years. So, I have been told. Izuku responded with a shrug. As for the rest, I find it funny to have a clear bully attempt to tell me which friendships are important. We're family and I'm always there for family, but make no mistake, give me a reason, and I will put you on your ass. Draco paled. Gone was the bubbly personality, and a cold fierceness had enveloped Izuku. The boy was terrifying. With a shaky nod, the 14-year-old scurried back to his own table. Calmly, Izuku turned back to his breakfast and found everyone gawking. What? Ron spluttered. Mate. You just scared the piss right out of Malfoy, and he didn't even threaten you with his father, or pull his wand. And a black. You're black. Technically I was raised in Midoriya, the teenager shrugged. That was the name my father went by before he vanished when I was 2. Now I'm legally Aizawa. What about your mother? Ginny questioned. Izuku winced. She died 7 months ago. Oh, Izuku, I'm so sorry. Thank you, Izuku smiled. I'm doing okay. Takes time I suppose, and this is a great distraction. So is that brother of yours, voiced a blonde girl, fanning herself. Goodness, now that's a man. By the collective sigh, she wasn't the only one who thought so. Lavender. Hermione squawked. Lavender laughed. Oh, relax there, Curls. Izuku blinked. These girls were getting dreamy-eyed over Kakin bursting into a fit of laughter. He wrapped his arms about his middle, and just barely kept his ass on the bench. Good luck with that. He's about as social as an angry bear. His comment didn't seem to deter them, but they'd learn. After breakfast, Izuku followed the rest of the Gryffindors to care of magical creatures. To his delight, the class was being held outside. It was cold, but he was too engrossed in memorizing the grounds to care. Overhead owls flew by, mail grasped in their claws. Izuku noticed what had to be pixies fluttering about. His green eyes lit up. Over here. At the call, Izuku looked over and blinked in surprise. The man was big, but then, he'd seen bigger. He'd have said a Quirk was the reason but doubted it. He filed it away in his mind to ask about later. Sirius seemed happy enough to answer his questions. Hello. The giant of a man greeted the minute they reached him, eyes on the new face. You must be Izuku, I'm Professor Rubeus Hagrid. It's nice to meet you, Izuku greeted with a respectful bow. Grinning, Hagrid dipped his head back in response, and gestured the collection of Gryffindors and Slytherins to follow. Alright, got a real treat for you today. Oh, bloody hell, Ron groaned lowly. Every time he says that. It's a creature big enough to eat us. Izuku wondered how true that was, or if Ron was exaggerating. But then when he got a load of their lesson, he changed his mind. The animal was huge, curled up on the grass and watching them with curious eyes. It looked like a giant lion at first glance, at least from the front, but nestled in its mane was the head of a goat, body blending with the lion, into the hind legs and hooves of a goat. Instead of a goat tail, grey fur blended into the vibrant green scales of a snake, including a head hissing in warning and fluttering at its back, were a large set of dragon-like wings, a splash of red scales scattered about its sides. It's a chimera. Izuku gushed excitedly, recognizing it instantly thanks to going through an obsession with mythical creatures when he was younger. But she is. Hagrid responded, delighted by Izuku's reaction. And not just any chimera. Artemis here is a winged chimera. One of the only known ones in Britain. They're native to Greece, but this poor girl was captured as a cub, and held captive for most of her life till a friend o' mine rescued and rehabilitated her. He's passing through and let me borrow her photo today, so you could see her. Now. What do you know about chimeras? Hermione raised her hand. Chimera are primarily female, and tend to live in packs with one male leader of the pack, just like lions. They breed once every 10 years and have been known to have rather large litters. While chimera both possess snake-headed tails, only the female chimera possesses venom, and both chimera can breathe fire once into adulthood. Well done. Hagrid cheered. 15 points to Gryffindor. Another thing you mightn't know is just how fiercely a mama chimera can be when it comes to her cubs. So, you should never goyle. No. Everything slowing, Izuku turned to see just what had panicked the professor. The boy, Goyle, had snuck close and made the mistake of reaching beneath Artemis's wing, to what was clearly a litter of chimera cubs. The mother immediately lunged, and Izuku reacted. Magic forgotten, one for all exploded over his body, green sparks flying, and in a split second he had come between Goyle and Artemis. He didn't want to hurt the chimera. He just needed to block her. Ah. Izuku howled. He had stopped her, getting a grip on her thick mane and pinning her down, but unfortunately the snake-headed tail got a strike in, and damn it, if he didn't immediately feel the burn of poison pumping into his shoulder. Feet digging into the earth, Izuku held his ground. Easy, Artemis, easy. Your cubs are fine. Gah. The fangs of her snake had dug in deeper, the creature trying desperately to shake him off, but Izuku wouldn't be easily budged. No? Artemis. Having secured the cubs, Hagrid moved around Izuku and cursed colorfully. Blood was rapidly soaking the teenager's robes, and the acrid stench of poison was impossible to avoid. Damn it. One of ye. Hit her with a stinging jinx. It'll shock her into letting go. Harry had his wand out in a second and aimed right for the snake head, casting the spell. With a shrieking yelp, Artemis pulled back, tail swinging, and with a rumbling snarl, the chimera shuffled toward her mewling cubs. Adrenaline rapidly wearing off, Izuku stumbled. He was barely aware of falling when arms caught him with a grunt. He had a glance of a lightning scar and stunning emerald eyes before darkness took him. Sing me home. Izuku was no stranger to waking up in the hospital, and this was twice now in the Hogwarts infirmary. From how low the sun was outside the windows, he had been out cold for several hours, and considering what his injury had been, he was shocked to find he didn't feel as bad as he could have. Sitting up, he got a good look at himself. Bandages covered his chest, left shoulder and part of his arm. The limb was stiff, tender, but he'd had worse. You're awake. Jumping, Izuku's head snapped around, and he found Harry stood in the doorway, wringing his hands and looking unsure. Sorry. Didn't mean to startle you. Your family went to get something to eat and I am offered to sit with you. Izuku noticed that green gaze darting to his right shoulder and flushed. Why did they leave him topless? Okay. Noticing Harry's confusion, he realized he spoke in Japanese. Shit. Sorry, my head is a bit groggy, you can sit with me. Looking about, he caught sight of what he recognized as Kasuki's favorite hoodie, and hastily yanked it on, ignoring the holler his shoulder gave. Harry pulled up a chair and took a seat. He hadn't felt this flustered ever. But something about Izuku just made him that way. Merlin. When Snape arrived and ripped open the green-haired teen's clothing to do quick first aid, his heart stuttered at the sight of muscle. He had known for quite some time he was gay. But actual attraction, well, it was a first. Your family is nice. Harry commented, cursing his blush when the taller boy looked at him. His eyes were a stunning green, but more dark sea green, rather than emerald like his own. Izuku smiled. Yeah, what happened after I passed out? He winced. I doubt my family were overly pleasant about it. Well, Hermione ran to get another teacher the minute the Chimera bit you, and ended up coming back with Snape, who was right pissed. Harry flinched at the memory. He had never seen Snape so angry. Snape patched you up and rushed you here. After that, I'm assuming Madame Pomfrey completed the treatment and we carried on with our classes, until your, brother Katsuki, sort of created a scene at lunch. Oh, crap, what did he do? Well, he stormed into the Great Hall and demanded to know what had happened. Which led him to, blasting Goyle into a wall. Izuku groaned, slapping a hand to his forehead. Cacking. Did he hurt him? Nothing, he won't survive. Both boys jumped, looking over when Katsuki marched in. His macho entrance somewhat dimmed by Eri sitting on his hip, giggling happily. Deku. You're awake, squirming to get down. The little girl rushed over, and to Harry's surprise and Izuku's amusement, scrambled up into Harry's lap with a beaming smile, before boosting herself onto the bed and into Izuku's arms. Hey, Eri, were you worried about me? Izuku asked. Pop and Daddy said you got bit by a huge animal. Daddy shouted a lot at the really big man, and the boy Katsuki beat up. Izuku winced. Why shout at Professor Hagrid? It was that idiot Goyle's fault. He stupidly went near Artemis's cubs. Something I pointed out once we figured out what idiot was at fault, Katsuki said with a sharkish grin, plopping down on the end of the bed. Stealing my hoodies again, nerd. It's warm. Izuku defended. How long will Goyle be in recovery? I don't see him here. He got suspended, Harry explained. Snape is his head of house, and his punishment was up to him. We were all stunned when he suspended him. As for injuries, relax, nerd, Katsuki scoffed. Nothing the witchy woman couldn't heal in an instant. He'll be fine. It wasn't his dumb ass that ended up pumped full of poison. Hey. You're awake. Jumping once again at the sudden noise, Izuku blinked in surprise as Hagrid tore toward him, the giant of a man openly sobbing. I'm so sorry. Artemis has never harmed a soul before. Chimera are just fierce when it comes to their cubs. Oh? Professor Hagrid, don't cry, Izuku pleaded. Look, I'm all patched up. It was an honest accident. Trust me, Izuku here will get into worse, Katsuki said, shaking his head. He's not known for self-preservation. I'm not that bad. Nerd, you shattered both your arms at that dumb camp, had lost a shit ton of blood, and still tried to save my sorry ass. That was once. The USJ incident. Oh, come on, Kakin. Can't forget about the hero exam and cheeks. 2 broken legs and an arm. Utterly mortified, Izuku groaned and plopped his head back on the pillow. Seemingly, Katsuki's words had the desired effect, because a moment later, Hagrid burst out laughing. And here I thought, no one could match our Harry for danger. Hagrid. Harry yelped, scandalized, only to laugh himself. Actually, I can't even argue with that. Psychotic wizard, basilisk, dementors, and now this year I've been entered into a tournament that could kill me. Our newly acquired family mentioned it, Katsuki said with a frown. Aren't you too young for it? Yes, but fate clearly hates me, so here I am, doing it anyway. Harry shrugged it off. It was really a waste to complain. Not as if anyone is attempting to get me out of it. Is there a contract? Izuku asked. Maybe I could take a look. These things usually have loopholes, or even just allowances to make it easier. Harry blinked. He hadn't actually thought of that. Maybe there was a way for him to at least have help. They talked a little while longer, until the rest of Izuku's family returned, Snape included. The injured teen was barely staying awake. Not surprising considering his body was still working through the poison. Thank you. Hisashi said cheerfully to Harry once the green-haired boy was sleeping. I just hate leaving any of them on their own when unwell. Harry smiled. It was no problem. I guess I'll see him tomorrow. He should be well enough for afternoon classes tomorrow, Severus supplied drolly. And hopefully we avoid any more dramatics. Maybe have a word with your students about approaching large animals without permission. Aizawa pointed out dryly. Harry tried not laugh. Aizawa may be the spitting image of Sirius, but his personality was purely Snape. Giving Izuku a last look, the 14-year-old said goodnight. He had homework to get to and no doubt Gryffindor desperate for an update, even if most of them were avoiding him. That, and he had a godfather to contact. Sing me home. Dear Padfoot. I heard you're visiting. Well, more ordered here and smacked with parental status. It's amazing how no one outside of those who know you personally noticed just how much Shota Aizawa looks like you. You couldn't deny him, mate. I have so many questions, Padfoot. Considering the fact that you despise Snape with a passion, how in the name of Merlin did you end up getting him pregnant? A fact I'm still getting my head around. Wizards can get pregnant. Would have been nice to know that. Anyway, back to Snape. How, why, when? I just can't picture it. Were you dating? Bored possessed, are you happy to be a dad? Granted. Dear Merlin, you're granted. Ha ha ha. Sorry, Padfoot, you're officially old. I feel this needs a face-to-face at some point. There's just too much to talk about, as well as other things. My nightmares, the tournament. Damn it, Padfoot, I'm terrified. Everyone is angry at me. No one seems to care I didn't put my name in that wretched goblet, and none of the adults are trying to get me out of it. There has to be something, anything, to at least get me through it alive. Because dead is the only thing I can think someone gains from this. Which has me wondering if certain nefarious wizards are involved. Anyway, I better get to my homework. Hermione is harping at me to get started. We'll organize a meetup soon. Be safe and for the love of Merlin, don't kill Snape. Harry. Reading through the letter twice more, Sirius shook his head in amusement. His poor godson had a lot going on, but still took the time to worry about him. It was sweet and appreciated. What are you smiling at? Mood dropping, Sirius sighed and glanced over at his unwanted roommate. Nothing that concerns you, sniffed Severus. Where are the rest of our brood? Ignoring the near slip of an insult, Severus hung up his winter cloak and made his way toward the couch across from Sirius, sitting with a pained grunt. November weather was not kind to old injuries. They're sitting with Izuku a little longer. He's awake. Mostly groggy from the poison and a little sore, but should be completely fine by tomorrow afternoon. And that idiot Goyle boy. Suspended till after the new year. Severus scowled, rubbing his temples to ward off the impeding migraine. Any other student would have died within minutes of that bite, but Izuku's quirk was already working to neutralize it when I arrived. Sweet Merlin, I nearly lost my life when I saw him. Chimera poison is nearly impossible to stop. Sirius frowned. He hadn't noticed just how exhausted Severus was. Leaning forward, he spoke gently. Yeah, but you got him, little snake. Severus went completely rigid, dark eyes whitening in shock and snapping towards Sirius. He hadn't heard that endearment in years, not since white-hot rage suddenly engulfed him. Don't call me that. The potion's master snarled, absolutely livid. You lost that right. Momentarily stunned, Sirius's face twisted into a sneer, and he sat back. Oh, I forgot you made that clear. Clear? What on earth was the mutt talking about? Oh, spare me, Black Severus snapped. I wasn't the one who threw their unintended lover away without so much as an L. We had become friends and then lost our minds one damn night, but I thought, well, it doesn't matter now. Threw you? What in Merlin's name are you talking about, Snape? Sirius seethed. You're the one who dragged my ass to the astronomy tower a week after I thought you wanted to make it official. I was all set to take whatever bullshit my mates tossed my way. But then you were right back to your Slytherin asshole ways and telling me what a sorry excuse for pureblood I was, and how it was never to happen again. 30 years ago. Sirius wasn't even sure how it happened. It certainly wasn't the first time he had ended up in detention with Severus Snape, but it was the first time a teacher decided to give them detention for a solid 5 months, and Merlin, damn it, the whole thing wasn't even his fault. Because they were in close quarters, the teenagers agreed to a truce, no point in getting further detention, and over the tiring nights, something changed. It started off with little things. Severus slipping while cleaning and Sirius catching him before he struck his head against the desk. Severus humming Muggle music, only for Cyrus to be surprised to find they liked the same bands. Realizing they liked the same Muggle authors and both hated vegetables. 3 weeks in and Sirius learned Severus was abused by his father. It cut so close to his own backstory that he started to see the Slytherin completely differently, and by the time their detention was over, they were friends. For fear the rest of the marauders would freak, Sirius kept quiet, and since he was in no mood to listen to the Slytherins bitching, Severus said nothing either. They found ways to meet in secret, passed notes to each other, and eventually gave into a desire that caught both of them by surprise. It had felt so right. Merlin, damn it. It was like coming home. Sirius had never desired anyone the way he had Severus in that moment. Every kiss, every touch, it was nothing short of masterful. So naturally the fates had to destroy it. It had been a week after that night. Caught up by schoolwork, Sirius thought little of it, beyond the fact that they were both busy, until an owl found him in the library, and he had felt a thrill of excitement. Severus had reached out. Eyes flitting over the parchment, he felt giddy. He wanted to meet the astronomy tower at 10. This was it. They'd make it official, and his friends would just have to deal with it, because there was just something about Severus that Sirius wanted to get to know, to keep, to have forever. "What's gotten into you?" James asked when Sirius bounced into the Gryffindor common room an hour before he was due to meet his snaky Slytherin, hazel gaze looking up from his Transfiguration homework. "You've been down in the dumps all week, now you're acting like you just ate an entire box of sugar quills." "Nope, Jamie. The last time I did that, I was spectacularly ill," Sirius reminded him cheerfully. "We promised we'd never repeat that fateful day. Remus swore he'd skin me alive, didn't you, Remy?" Startled from his potions book, Remus frowned at his friend. "You, mate, are wired too much pepper-up potion." "That was one time. Twice, actually," Peter corrected from where he lay sprawled on the floor, trying to get his own homework done. "Remember last Christmas? What happens in the shack, stays in the shack," Sirius warned, horrified, making his three best friends laugh. Setting his work aside, James stretched, eyes locked on the dog shifter. "Seriously, Pads, what's going on?" Squirming under his friend's scrutiny, Sirius wanted to tell all of them, just not yet. Not until there was something to tell. "Something great, hopefully you'll know soon, Jamie, I promise." James watched him a moment. He itched to know what was going on, but he trusted his friend, and he respected his privacy. "Alright, Pads, we're holding you to that." With a nod, an excited squirm, Sirius darted upstairs to the six-year dorms, and hurriedly got ready. Some reading, and he grinned in delight when he found what he was looking for. The black ring on a pretty silver chain. He was no doubt jumping several damn steps, but Merlin, he didn't care. He never expected Severus Snape of all people to be his perfect other half, and yet, here they were. Pocketing the trinket, he took one last look at himself in the mirror and rushed out, hollering a quick goodbye to his mates. The castle was pretty quiet. At this hour only 6th and 7th years were permitted to be outside of their common rooms, as were the teachers, and with the winter well underway, it was already dark. By the light of the sconces, flames flickering, Sirius made his way up the stairs of the astronomy tower, and found it secluded. He expected as such. He was early, so it didn't worry him. The night was stunning. The sky clear, stars shimmering, and a brilliant moon lit up the top of the tower. There was just something perfectly romantic about it. "You're here." Heart stuttering, Sirius turned and grinned at the sight of Severus leaning against the archway. Still in his uniform, the teenager looked bored. Warning bells went off in his head, but the dog shifter shook it off. "I wanted to see you." Little Snake sauntering toward him, he grasped Severus's sleeve and tugged him forward, intent on a proper greeting, only to be shoved hard. "Don't call me that," Severus snarled, watching the startled Gryffindor stumble. "You think I wanted any of this?" Pain twisted Sirius's insides. No. That couldn't be right. The black ring suddenly weighed a ton in his pocket, and he was positive his heart had shattered. Still, he tried. "Be very funny, Little Snake, you have a twisted sense of humor. I always said that. Are we going to have a real conversation now?" Severus snorted. "What conversation? About my mistake, or the fact I wasted my time on a sorry excuse for a pureblood? Since you're hard of hearing, Black, let me spell this out for you. It will never happen again." No. Why was Severus being like this? After everything. "If you don't want to pursue a relationship, fine, but nothing stops us being friends." Merlin, he sounded like a begging nut. How pathetic was that? "Don't do this, please, Sev, please." Typical dog, Severus sneered. "Gets kicked but keeps coming back." "Not this time, mongrel. Don't dare approach me. Don't contact me. As of this moment, you are to stay away from me. Am I clear?" Numbly, Sirius nodded. He barely noticed when Severus had left or when he had sunk to the floor. When the tears came, he just let them fall. Present day. Severus paced in shock. Sirius sat, hands shaking after hashing out what had always been a shite memory for him, and in all honesty, the stunt he pulled with Remus suddenly made a lot of sense. Merlin knows, he'd have been just as vicious had someone hurt him in the same manner, but it wasn't him. Spinning to face him, hair mussed from the hand dragging through it, Severus cursed colorfully, before trying to defend himself. Sweet Merlin's balls and Morgana's tits. It wasn't me. A snarky bastard I may be and was even then, but I wasn't the cruel type unless others were cruel to me first, and that had changed between us. We were friends. I know. Sirius exploded, bursting up, stalking up and down like a trapped lion. But I didn't imagine it, Snape. You were there. Shouting things only you knew. You think things aren't found out? Severus demanded incredulously. Hogwarts is like a small village. Everyone knows everything. It was you. It struck by something. Sirius's complexion ran gray, and with a curse he dropped down onto the couch. What? Severus demanded. Typical dog, you, he Merlin only fucking knows. Said to me typical dog as well as called me a mongrel. Cyrus dropped his head back, pinching the bridge of his nose. I was so fucked up I never noticed, but you hadn't known I'm a dog animagus. Not at that time, not until last year in fact. Only 3 knew I was Remus, James, and that rat bastard Pettigrew. Severus sucked in a breath when an old memory hit him with a smack. A week before the Whomping Willow debacle I could have sworn I saw Pettigrew messing around Slughorn stores. I wasn't sure, and since I was still holding out hope for us I stayed quiet. Rumor was some of his pre-made polyjuice had gone missing. Pettigrew the complete moron was so twisted up about loyalty. At that time, he'd have seen you as a threat and would have thought he was protecting me. Sirius snarled. Wouldn't be the first time he followed us when we were doing our own thing and did something stupid. I can't count how many times Jamie started shite with you because Pettigrew fed him some false bullshit that he knew would hack him off. Course it wasn't till 7th year we figured that out. Led to a huge blowout. Severus blinked in surprise. Really? Oh yeah, Pettigrew apologized eventually, and we mended fences, or so we thought. Hindsight is a great thing. Sirius scoffed. He managed to trash our lives back a lot further than any of us knew. Fuck. I am so sorry. If I had just talked to you that night instead, I let my rage get the better of me. We could have raised our kid. Been together. Severus was astounded. Sirius Black was actually apologizing. Miracles never ceased. Wincing at his own snarkiness, reminding himself they had been victims of someone else's interference, Severus moved to sit next to him. He never noticed before, but unlike when they were teenagers, he was now a full height or so taller than Sirius, but the man was still blockier. I suppose Severus started, not sure where to begin, but to hell with it, he took the plunge. We draw a line and start fresh. Head snapping up, Sirius positively gawped. Was Severus really offering him something so sacred? Common sense would have meant starting from step 1, but Sirius logic had that flying right out the window and yanking the man toward him to crash their lips together in a fiery kiss. He expected his balls to be hacks off, but warmth immediately flooded him when Severus kissed back. The taller wizard sliding into his lap, such a familiar sensation that Sirius groaned with hunger. His hands fisted in long dark hair, lips taking feverishly, until... Get a room. Springing apart, tussled, and breathing heavily, Severus and Sirius set their gazes on the one who shouted. Katsuki stood, Yuri's little face pressed protectively into his shoulder, glaring at them both, while Hitachi, along with Hisashi, absolutely howled with laughter. Next to his brood, Aizawa raised a brow and said dryly. Use a condom, I'm too old for a baby brother or sister. Don't encourage them. Katsuki spluttered. Oh, don't worry, kiddo. Sirius grinned, tossing an arm about Severus's slim waist, and loving his crimson cheeks. Silencing charms are a thing. Daddy? Yeah, Yuri. What's a condom? Sing me home. The next day, shoulders still a tad achy, Izuku rushed through the halls of Hogwarts and made it to Transfiguration just before the last student stepped inside. He had missed most of his morning classes due to Madame Pomfrey fussing, as well as Hisashi insisting he stay put, but thanks to Aizawa and Severus, he eventually made his escape. He had never been one to sit idle, not even for a severe injury, and honestly, he had been up and about after much worse during the sports festival, and after the camp incident. The Chimera bite was nothing. Oh? Izuku. Over here. Catching sight of Hermione, Izuku smiled. She had saved him a seat by the looks of it. Dropping down next to her, he noted the small group either side of the classroom. Some in military style and others in powdered blue. This must be the 2 other schools. Whereas the girls in the blue paid him no mind, he couldn't help but notice the others were staring. Hey mate. Ron greeted from behind him. How's the shoulder? Shaking off the foreboding feeling, Izuku grinned back at him. Not too bad today. Honestly, I've had worse in hero training. I bet. Harry snorted. Your brother let some slip. 2 shattered arms. Cheeks pinking, Izuku hurriedly pulled out his books, ignoring Harry's warm laughter, and the nice little flutter it sent through him. As well as his books, he pulled out a thick notebook already color-coded, named and half full. Hermione beamed when she saw the English scrawl underneath the Japanese Hermione's notes. You've been busy, I see. Izuku chuckled. Yeah, I had a lot of time between yesterday and this morning. I've gotten down the first 2 years so far. Jaw dropping, Hermione squawked a noise. Ron and Harry were equally stunned. 2 years and then you understood it. Every subject. Izuku nodded absently. I want to give everything another read through before I try any of the spells, of course, and I need to borrow some books for some deeper. Why are you all looking at me like that? Hermione, Ron, and Harry stared at him with awe. Ron was the first to break the moment with a snort. Well, it seems there's someone who likes to study more than you, Hermione. Both Izuku and Hermione flushed darkly. Mouth open to protest, Hermione quickly closed it when Professor McGonagall breezed in. Books open to page 83, and students of Beauxbatons and Durmstrang, look it with a Hogwarts student. Welcome Mr. Aizawa, you're looking better. Flushing under the sudden scrutiny of the other students, Izuku shifted in his seat. Yeah thank you, Professor. With a curt nod toward her news line, McGonagall flicked her wand toward the board, the chalk springing to life to scrawl instructions. Izuku opened up his thick notebook to the section he'd already begun for 4th year and started scribbling away. The switching spell, the incantation in Latin, was unus pro alio, which translated to one for another. A transfiguration spell used to switch the positions of two objects. The concept was simple enough to understand, and Izuku was already visualizing the multiple benefits of such a spell, pen scratching over paper as he worked. It was all so fascinating to him. Magic could achieve a lot in abundance for one person that many people could with individual quirks. He couldn't wait to see how he could apply it to his hero training. So, McGonagall began once the chalk had finished its job. Reading what is on the board, can anyone tell me a benefit to such a spell? When Izuku's hand was one of the first to rise, she blinked in shock. For someone only dipping his toes in so far, she figured he'd be quiet for a while, yet here he was, diving right in. Yes, Mr. Aizawa. Protection. Izuku bubbled cheerfully. If someone had a weapon or were there one, you could switch it for something else like a feather duster, to protect yourself. Of course, the one would be trickier being a magical object then. There's the lethal applications in the wrong hands, where well someone could switch out your heart for a tennis ball, and kill you instantly. A fact they don't mention in your books, a Durmstrang student commented idly, grinning over at Izuku. You've a dark mind. Izuku frowned. Everyone barred the Durmstrang students were looking at him strangely. What was wrong with what he said? Not dark, he corrected the other boy. Just understanding the spell from every angle. Aren't we supposed to? One would think. That's enough, McGonagall snapped. Thank you, Mr. Aizawa, for that description. Now, the one movement's required. Izuku listened, albeit reluctantly, to the rest of the lecture. What he said that was wrong. The rest of the Gryffindors, apart from Hermione, Ron and Harry, were looking at him strangely. Whereas the Slytherins had curious expressions. Feeling a nudge, he glanced down. Harry had slipped him a scrap of paper, and mindful of watching eyes, Izuku unfurled a gaze darting over the messy scroll. Don't take it personally. McGonagall can be harsh. That was putting it mildly. Very aware he had committed some sort of slight, Izuku kept his head down. When the bell signaled, he was the first out. Izuku, wait up. Stopping, Izuku watched Harry rush to catch up with him, alongside Hermione and Ron. Look, he immediately defended. I don't know what the big deal is. I pointed out the negative of the spell, so what? It's because the switching spell is a light spell, Hermione explained. Witches and wizards don't like hearing a light spell can have darker usages. Izuku blinked. That was their hang-up. That was stupid. That's ridiculous. Magic like a quirk can be used either way, it all depends on the user. It's stupid to categorize them as one or the other. I read through the standard book of spells from first year, and a lot of them could be used for both. That's what I said. Harry exclaimed, remembering a conversation he had in first year when he made the mistake of saying the exact same thing. But no, you're not supposed to say that. Thank you. Izuku laughed, glad one of them got it. Yes. Exactly. Hermione and Ron fell into step behind the boys and watched in amusement as Harry lit up in a way he hadn't before, delving into a topic on light vs dark definitions in regard to spell work. They chatted animatedly the whole way to charms. It was honestly adorable. Books at. Wands at the ready. Professor Flitwick called out, perched on his usual stack of books. Today we will be touching up on our summoning charm. Oh. Welcome, you must be Izuku Aizawa. Shaking himself out of a stupor after he had momentarily gawked at the tiny wizard, Izuku gave a hasty bow, before taking a seat next to Harry. Hi, yes, I'm Izuku Aizawa. A pleasure. Now, just to catch up, Mr. Aizawa, we are practicing the summoning charm today. Accio. Flitwick smiled. Would you like to give it a try? Blinking in surprise, Izuku shifted nervously. He had yet to attempt any magic, and had already been warned that there was a potential for overpowering his spells by accident. But hey, it wasn't like he hadn't dealt with worse backlash. At least any damage would be outward rather than inward. No broken bones to worry about. With a nod, Izuku readied out his wand and waited for Flitwick to explain the basics of the spell. His brain logged away everything, running through all components and focusing on a cup upon the professor's desk. He raised his wand, and confidently cast the summoning spell. Accio cup. Months of honed instincts was the only thing that stopped the porcelain smacking him right in the face. With a gasp, Izuku snatched it out of the air and grinned in delight. He had done magic. Oh? Well done, Mr. Aizawa. Flitwick praised. On your first try. Alright. Everyone, each pick out a small object and the person beside you should each try to summon it. It was chaos and the most fun Izuku had in a long time. For some the spell didn't come easy, and to others, like Izuku, it came too easy, which led to quills, trinkets, all sorts of items whizzing all over the room. More than once, poor Professor Flitwick ended up diving for cover. By the time the bell went, the green-haired teen had forgotten the weird behavior in Transfiguration. Sing me home. Stomping through the halls, kitted out in his hero gear and fully aware he was drawing looks, Katsuki searched each face for his brother. He knew the last class had just ended, and he was itching to train. Hitachi could be a good spar, but to give his quirk a full workout, he needed Izuku. Catching sight of a familiar head of hair, the ash blonde grinned and without a care, hollered loudly. Hey girls. Dumping, Hermione spun around, eyes wide and jaw dropping at the sight sauntering toward her. The girls around her swooned because if Katsuki was a stunning specimen in just ordinary clothes, which was nothing compared to his appearance in hero gear fitted tight to steel-like muscles. "Hey Katsuki." Hermione stammered, red staining her cheeks. Did you need something?" Merlin, she could all but feel the blazing heat off of the other girls. Katsuki grinned roguishly. "Have you seen my little brother? No, your classes are over and he owes me some training. Your headmaster gave us permission to use the grounds." Fascinated, Hermione positively wiggled. "Wait. Training, can I watch? I'd love to see how your quirks work." "Sure, curls, just keep back. Dumbledore is setting up a safety barrier, don't go past it." "Brilliant." Hermione beamed, grabbing his gloved hand and pulling him through the gawping crowd. "He's in Gryffindor Tower with Harry." Gryffindor Tower was about what Izuku expected. A lot of red and gold covered everything, from the furniture to the walls and even the floor. Lions in different positions decorated everything, even the sconces, and a huge fire roared in the hearth. Harry showed him to the fourth-year dorms, and he was glad to see his belongings were already transferred. Changing out of the heavy school robes was a relief. He never thought he'd find something as uncomfortable as his hero gear, but that he was at least used to, and he wasn't at risk of tripping in it. Buried in homework or gossip, the other Gryffindors barely glanced his way when he returned to the common room. Nor did he notice him having a double take at his appearance. In a t-shirt and cutoffs, it was obvious just how built he was, even Harry found himself blushing. "I found the contract," the younger Gryffindor blurted, trying to distract himself. He thrust the scroll toward Izuku, who took it looking confused by Harry's behavior, and why wouldn't he when Harry was acting like a complete tosser? Ordering himself to get a grip, he gestured to the paperwork Izuku was already absorbed in. They had to sign one each the day after the goblet spat out our names. Hermione's read through it like 3 times, but there's no way out of it but to compete. Izuku could see that, but holy crap, the contract was all over the place. Some was in English, some in Latin, and the Latin was a mix of binding spells, as well as part of the fine print. Which was just damn typical. A language he was still working on and one that made him suspicious. Why not just have it all in English? Green eyes narrowing with determination, Izuku rolled up the scroll and stuffed it into his bag. "Leave it with me. I want to give it a thorough look." Harry nodded, chewing his lip nervously. "Do you think you'll find anything?" "No harm in trying," Izuku replied, only to yelp when the door burst open, and Katsuki strode in full hero gear, Hermione right behind him. "The hell, Kakin, what are you doing up here? Are you even permitted to be up here?" Katsuki grinned fiercely. "Get your gear on, nerd. You owe me a training session." "Oh, come on." Izuku groaned, tossing his head back irritably. "I'm exhausted." "Do I look like I give a shit?" Katsuki barked. "Listen to your big brother, nerd. Ass up, gear on." "Sometimes I really hate you," Kakin, Izuku grumbled, dragging himself up and hurrying upstairs to get ready. Because he knew the stubborn blonde would lose patience fast and begin howling up the stairs, he changed quickly and headed back down to where some of the Gryffindor girls were already fawning over his brother. Izuku rolled his eyes. It would do them no good, especially when, he noticed with amusement, Katsuki was already very taken with someone else. And from what Izuku could see, the other girls had noticed and weren't happy. "I'm ready," Izuku called out, yanking on the last of his gear and disrupting the girls' desperate attempts. With a grin, Katsuki leaped up from the couch she had plopped on. "Come on, girls. You said you wanted to watch." Oh, if that didn't earn Hermione some glares. Not that the girls seemed to care, and to Izuku's secret delight, Harry packed up his stuff and followed. Hilariously, by the time they reached the grounds, quite the crowd had joined them, along with the Weasley gang, and even students from Beauxbatons and Durmstrang had fallen into step with them, and when they reached the grounds, Izuku was stunned to see his family and all the Hogwarts professors waiting. "I hope you don't mind," Albus called out cheerfully. "We're curious to see how your quirks operate. Your parents said it was acceptable, as long as you are happy with it." Katsuki scoffed. "Whatever. It's okay with me. What about you, nerd?" "Yeah, I'm good." "Excellent." Albus turned, and with a wordless wave of his wand, a powerful shield sprang to life. The shimmering pale blue spread out in a dome, leaving the heroes plenty of room for their session. The wizard left an opening until the teenagers stepped through, sealing it up. Within the dome it was quieter, and to Izuku's surprise even more had gathered to watch. "We're quite the crowd, Kakin." Stretching, Katsuki grinned. "Oh yeah. Then let's show them exactly what we can do." Katsuki moved before Izuku had even set a stance, but then, he had expected that. With a grin, he dodged it, his legs allowing him to spring up and flip right over Katsuki's head. The shocked exclamations fell on deaf ears, because the pair were fully locked on each other. Outside the dome, his ashi wiggled with delight. "Look at our boys go, Sho. Aizu is getting faster," Hitachi commented. "Definitely dodging Katsuki easier, and neither are even using their quirks yet. We've been focusing on hand-to-hand," Aizawa explained. Quirks have limits, just like our muscles, and heroes will be better utilizing both. This is amazing. Hermione gushed, warm brown eyes locked on Kasuki as he moved in a way she'd never seen anyone move. Not even heroes in England. But then, Japan produced some of the best. Their training known to be brutal in comparison. They're quite in sync. Comes from a long time of working together, Severus remarked, eyes locked on his grandsons. Wizards and witches can achieve it too with our magic. You begin to predict the other's movements. Listening to the conversation with one ear, Harry watched Izuku mesmerized. Quidditch players were athletic, but they had nothing on these heroes. When Kasuki managed to get a hit in, he cringed, but Izuku was fast to retaliate, and that's where things got interesting. Sparks on Kasuki's hands were the only warning they had before an explosion ripped through the earth, colliding with the dome with enough force it shimmered. For a moment, Albus thought it wouldn't hold, but the magic stayed in place, and from the smoke Izuku leaped, green lightning sparking all over his body, eyes locked on his brother. Getting faster, nerd. Kasuki called up from the ground, grin on his face. I have to be to keep up with you, Kakin. Izuku laughed, before propelling himself toward the older boy. Midair, he spun and came at Kasuki with a powerful axe kick that sent the ash blonde back several feet. The older teen blocked with his arms, but damn, it would leave bruises. With a howl, Kasuki lunged, one of his blasts already flying, but Izuku had anticipated the counterattack and spun out of reach. He realized, to his delight, he could use the protective dome to bounce off of, and channeling Gran Torino, he was fast on making use of it. Kasuki swore colorfully, watching the green-haired boy all but zoom about. Using the damn dome as a springboard, clever shit. Damn it, nerd. Kasuki bellowed. Get your ass back here. Hands sparking, the ash blonde shot skyward and began following Izuku's jumps, tossing attacks that the younger teenager skillfully dodged. Look at them move. Lavender brown cooed next to Hermione, fanning her flushed cheeks. Especially that gorgeous blonde. Next to her, Katie Bell positively swooned. I wonder if they have girlfriends. It's just a flashy quirk. It isn't superior to magic. It would never stand up to magic. Listening to everything out of habit, Aizawa caught the sneery words and glanced over to see a haughty platinum blonde stood with his arms crossed and a sour expression. He recognized him instantly. Izuku had mentioned him. Draco Malfoy. The cousin to the Black family. Which made him also a cousin to Aizawa. The kid definitely needed to be taken down a peg or two, and clearly he wasn't the only one who thought so. Oh, shove off, Malfoy, Harry snarled, green eyes narrowed irritably and keeping his tone low to avoid catching the attention of the teachers. You wouldn't last 2 seconds against one of them, and you know it. Maybe I should put that to test, Scarhead. Draco snapped back. Oh, that I'd like to see. Hitachi, who had also been listening in on the drama, snorted and stepped around his parents toward the bickering 14-year-olds. Normally he'd ignore such pointless crap, but damn it, the blonde brat needed to be taught a lesson, and since the teachers appeared to be deaf to his behavior, he would happily volunteer. Harry noticed him first, stepping out of the way when Hitachi stopped in front of Malfoy, sizing him up. They were drawing some looks from the surrounding students, but Hitachi didn't care. The blonde brat was trying to stare him down, and honestly it was hilarious. Like a mouse trying to square up to a cat. A dangerous grin curling his mouth, Hitachi chuckled darkly. So, a tiny mage you like you thinks you can take on one of my brothers. Puffing up his chest, Draco's fingers curled about his wand in his pocket. Of course, I could, you nasty, little. Harry watched in fascination as Draco's expression went completely lax, a moment before the protective barrier surrounding Izuku and Katsuki shimmered and fell, and the brothers stepped free. They were bloodied, bruised and laughing, both coming up short at the sight of a frozen Draco. Hitachi Izuku chided, realizing immediately what was going on. Let him go. Hitachi grinned. Fine, but not before I prove a point. Draco was it. You're a cat. It was one of those moments no one would ever forget. In under a second, Draco had dropped to all fours and arched his spine in a stretch, a deep purr rumbling from Merlin knows where. But when he began winding about Harry's legs, well, let's just say, everyone was delighted. Colin Creevy carried his camera everywhere. The teachers were flustered. A mix of amusement and confusion crossing their features. After all, they didn't see Hitachi do anything, and yet, Draco was completely within his control. That's enough, Hitachi Aizawa deadpanned, lips twitching with mirth. Let him go. With a sigh, Hitachi barely moved before Draco let out a blood-curdling scream, and scrambled away from where he was cuddling into Harry Bloody Potter. Eyes peeled wide, he spluttered, lurching to his feet, before turning tail and fleeing back toward the castle, loud laughter following him all the way. What was that? Hermione asked, confused by what she had just witnessed. Brainwashing, Curls, Katsuki grunted. It's Hitachi's quirk. Not like you to just use it though, eyebags, what happened? I too would like an explanation. Izuku winced and glanced over to the infuriated Minerva stomping toward them. Using your quirk on a student. I was proving a point, Hitachi retorted. Your student spoke ill of my brother's ability. Sneered at it, considers magic superior. I decided to show him otherwise. That was not up to you to reprimand, Minerva scolded. Seriously? You were all right here and said nothing. Hitachi shook his head in disgust. Makes me wonder how often he gets away with crap. How dare you? Enough, Albus ordered, blue eyes flashing with rare temper. Draco threw down the challenge and learned the hard way. That boy's ego tends to get him in trouble. He all but used an unforgivable, Albus. Minerva hissed angrily. We forbid it in magic for a reason. Only then did Hitachi notice Minerva wasn't the only one looking at him strangely. The teachers were a mix of curious and angry, the same with the students. Heart thumping, he felt panicked. I didn't do anything beyond proving that idiot wrong. I asked a question, he responded, and it let me use my quirk. I made him believe he was a cat. Big deal. Maybe he should be muzzled for our safety. A Slytherin called out. Oh, shut it, Zabini. Ron snarled angrily, red blooming on his cheeks. No one asked you. Everything in Hitachi drained from him, his complexion losing all color the minute he heard the word muzzled. Head shaking, he backed away, eyes glassy with fear. No, you can't. Words coming out in frantic Japanese, the teenager was ready to bolt. Tashi, baby Hisashi called out, shoving through the crowd, eyes on his son. Hey, no one is going to muzzle you. Okay, kiddo. No one. Breathing harshly, Hitachi wasn't hearing him. An old fear had dug in and stolen the air from his lungs. All he could see was him as a scared boy of 6 and that muzzle, that horrible piece of metal cutting into his tiny face. I'll be good. Hitachi pleaded, tears welling. I promise. Easy, Hitachi Izuku said gently, blocking him off at the rear, remembering just how bad Hitachi was the last time he was triggered. No one is going to hurt you, but it wasn't helping. Hitachi wasn't calming down. Frantic, Izuku switched to English. Professors. One of you need to put him to sleep. It was what they had to do last time, but they didn't exactly have midnight handy. Without questioning it, too concerned by his grandchild's ragged breathing, Severus pulled out his wand and quickly cast. Somnus. Instantly Hitachi dropped, Izuku catching him, and Hisashi sagged with relief. If everyone is done gawking, I suggest you head back inside. Severus ordered, grateful when all the students, including their guest students, had the sense to make themselves scarce. What in Merlin's name is going on? Minerva demanded. 1 minute the boy was being cocky with her, the next he had gone white as one of the Hogwarts ghosts, and began speaking frantically in Japanese, before Severus had to use the sleeping spell on him. What happened? Minerva as always spat. Was you badly handling a situation, leading to my kid suffering a PTSD episode? He was just glad they had left Erie to spend some time with Sirius. She hated seeing her brothers upset. Without waiting to hear an answer, he retrieved Hitachi and nudged his family toward the school. In all the drama, no one even knew who had won Izuku and Katsuki's battle. Sing me home. Sirius was having a blast. He had been stunned when Aizawa suggested leaving Erie with him, but quickly got over it. She had been shy at first, unsure what to do in his presence. Of course, that changed instantly when he shifted into Padfoot. Erie's delighted squeal was wonderful, and the little girl was on him instantly, burrowing into his fur and happily petting him. It was enough to break the ice, and before long he was running around playing tag with her. At some point, they found themselves at the coffee table, paper everywhere and crayons loose. A massive plate of biscuits rested next to them, courtesy of Romy, tea in one cup and hot chocolate in another. They were probably through a ridiculous amount of pictures when the doors were thrown open with a bang. At Erie's yelp, Sirius was on his feet in an instant, wand at the ready, set to hack whoever what in the name of Merlin. What happened? Hurrying in, Hitachi in his arms, Aizawa barely spared him a glance as he hurried down to the room the boys were sharing. Hisashi was right behind him, and when the door shut with a snap, Sirius turned his attention to Severus, Katsuki and Izuku. Anyone care to explain? PTSD, Katsuki grunted, flopping onto the couch and snagging a cookie. Thanks to an idiot teacher and an idiot student. Eyes snapping towards Severus, Sirius hoped he'd catch him up, and thankfully he was happy to oblige. By the time he got the gist of it, Sirius was fit to take a bite out of someone. Minerva, the judgmental old woman. She had the bedside manner of a troll. Of course, it didn't explain why Hitachi got so upset over a student mentioning a muzzle, and something twisting in his gut told Sirius he really didn't want to know. Still, he looked at his grandsons and asked, why is he so scared of muzzles? Izuku winced. It was a touchy subject. None of them had taken it well. When Hitachi's quirk first manifested, he wasn't very good at controlling it. He would accidentally control people. His parents got angry they wouldn't accept it was an accident, and eventually they muzzled him. It was how our parents found him, Katsuki continued, his words growled. Just a terrified kid, abandoned, with a muzzle keeping him from speaking. He still has scars if you look close enough. Sirius resisted the urge to curse a blue streak. Not with Erie within earshot. Hand dragging through his curls, he wanted to go to Japan, find the kid's parents and play with his magic. Where are his parents now? Annihilated, he hoped. Prison. Izuku shook his head in disgust. They were convicted for child abandonment, neglect and abuse. Another 10 years to go on their sentence. 15 altogether. Sirius hissed a breath, just about containing a profanity. That's all. Ridiculous. They should have gotten life. We know. Katsuki agreed, understanding his rage all too well. But quirk discrimination is one of those things that just happens in Japan, with very little done about it. Idiot extras too quick to brand you a villain if you have what they say is a villainous quirk. Magic is no different, Izuku pointed out irritably. Something else that Professor McGonagall has an issue with. I learned today that you don't point out how magic could be used both ways, because apparently magic has been categorized as light or dark. Groaning, Katsuki tossed his head back. Morons. Quirks, magic, guns. It doesn't matter the wrong idiot with it makes it dangerous. If people weren't so quick to label these things, we'd have less villains. Severus couldn't disagree with that. After all, too many wizards and witches had ended up in Voldemort's clutches because they were branded from birth. They were born into a known dark family, had a well-known dark relative, ended up in Slytherin. On and on the list went. To hear Quirks tended to suffer for the same idiocy sickened him. Will he be okay once he wakes? Izuku nodded. Yes. I asked for someone to use the sleep spell because Hitachi can end up using his quirk by accident during an episode. Once he sleeps, he tends to shake it off and be back to himself once he wakes. Shaking his head, Severus sat down. I'm sorry about all of this. You aren't exactly having a great introduction to Hogwarts. It's been interesting, Izuku said, giving his grandmother a reassuring smile. I suppose it's just a human trait to categorize a gift into good or bad, with no in-between. Iri looked between them all confused, not really understanding what was wrong. But still, she understood enough that it was a grown-up problem. Maybe one of her pictures would cheer everyone up. Rooting through the pile of papers, she found her favorite and wiggling off the couch, she hurried towards Severus, holding it out. Severus blinked in surprise. Where Iri had been less nervous around Sirius, she had yet to approach him. He didn't exactly exude a friendly presence. Taking the proffered paper, Severus looked it over and Merlin, everything in him went to mush. It was a family picture of all of them. He and Sirius stood hand in hand, big smiles on their faces, surrounded by their son, Hisashi and the children. Smiling warmly, Severus reached out to hug the little girl, delighted when she snuggled into him. Thank you, Iri. I love it. With something so simple, the tension broke, and the family settled in to talk and enjoy tea. When Hitachi finally emerged with Aizawa and Hisashi, he looked drained and embarrassed. None of them drew attention to it. Merely offered him tea and a biscuit. If he wanted to talk about it, they were all set to listen and looking around at them all. Severus for the first time in years felt whole. Yawning, Izuku scrambled through the Gryffindor entrance and blinked in surprise. It was late, past curfew even, and yet Harry, Ron and Hermione sat on one of the plusher couches, talking amongst themselves. Hi. Three heads snapped up, relief flooding their faces. Hermione up and rushing toward him, to hug Izuku fiercely, leaving the teenager blushing. Oh. Thank Merlin. We were so worried. Are you okay? How's your brother? Your father was furious. Hermione, let the bloke breathe. Ron chided gently, freeing Izuku from the frantic girl. You've been gone for hours, mate. We were afraid they tossed you all out. Izuku frowned. What the hell for? Hitachi did nothing wrong. Overstepped at the very worst but nothing criminal. I don't get why everyone went so weird. Unforgivable, that's what Professor McGonagall said. It was an unforgivable band in magic. Anyone feel like explaining? He probably could have asked Severus or Sirius, but there were other priorities. Harry looked between his friends and with a sigh, he figured he could field this one. In magic there are 3 spells known as unforgivable curses. We just did a class about them. You can't even cast them. They were used quite a bit during the last war, and since then, it makes witches and wizards nervous. They're the torture curse, the death curse and the mind control curse. Eyes widening, Izuku suddenly understood why everyone had been freaking out. But something caught his attention. Wait, war? Harry blinked. You don't know? I've been playing catch-up, but no one mentioned a war and I certainly didn't read about one. Unless you mean the Goblin Wars. Honestly, I had a hard time getting my brain to focus on that. Even for my brain it was too much. Looking between the trio, Izuku had a feeling it was a lot worse than the Goblin Wars. It was bad, I'm guessing. Where to even begin? Despite the late hour, the 3 delved in and told Izuku everything. How the war began. Everything to do with the wizard known as Voldemort, how it had led to the death of Harry's parents, and how it left the man dormant for years. That was until he started cropping up again, causing havoc even as a wraith. Sagging back in the armchair, Izuku couldn't help but note the similarities between it and All Might and All for One. Hadn't they thought that psychotic bastard was dead for years? Only to creep back and try and tear down everything. Absently, he rubbed at his left shoulder. The scar aching a little, as it tended to do in the cold weather. Sitting up straight, the 16-year-old set serious eyes on the younger 3. Do you think he had something to do with Harry ending up in the tournament? Honestly, mate, Ron snorted. That wouldn't surprise us. No one else wants him dead that badly. Ron. What, Hermione, it's true. Izuku couldn't help but laugh at their antics. And here he thought Todoroki could be blunt. a yawn suddenly rolling through him, he scrubbed his eyes tiredly. Damn it. According to the clock it was 2 am. They had to be up in 5 hours. Oh, for Merlin's sake. Hermione admonished, getting to her feet. Enough of this. Izuku is dead on his feet, and we have class in only a few hours. We better get to bed. Ron and Harry grumbled half-heartedly, but truth be told, they were just as tired. Parting ways at the staircases, the boys waved sluggishly goodnight as they made their way upstairs. In their dorm, snores filled the room and energy draining. Izuku barely had enough in him to remove his shoes before collapsing onto his bed. Alcohol before his head even hit the pillow. Sing me home. The rest of the week thankfully progressed without any drama. Hitachi perked up and the students and teachers seemed to get over what had happened with his quirk. Of course, rumor was that Severus had had quite the word with Minerva over it, and made it clear he would not have his grandchild discriminated against, and Katsuki made quite the spectacle more than once when students spoke out of turn. Izuku had finally got into a rhythm in regard to catching up and learning magic at a 4th-year level, as well as managing hero training and coursework. It helped that his parents were both heroes and UA teachers. When he wasn't training or doing homework, he was busy poring over the contract Harry had given him. Scribbling in a notebook, green eyes darting over the text, only to thump his head on the desk in sheer frustration. Damn it. He had to be missing something. No luck. Jerked from his thoughts, the teenager looked up to find Harry hovering over him and felt even more useless. No. He ground out on a frustrated breath. I've gone through it numerous times and can't seem to find a catch. The Latin paragraphs are just more of the same as what's in English or binding spells holding you to the contract. Harry watched Izuku yank at his green curls, grumbling what was no doubt creative curse words in Japanese. Typical of a hero, he supposed. The older teen had so badly wanted to help him, but things sometimes were set in stone. Come on, mate, we need to head to defense against the dark arts. It'll probably be less stressful at this point. Defense against the dark arts. I don't think I've had that class yet. Izuku rooted out his schedule and scanned it. Nope, I was sleeping off Artemis's poison the last time. Alistair Moody, isn't it the professor? I've seen him in the Great Hall at mealtimes. The man with the full cyan leg. That would be him. Barking mad, but bloody brilliant. Harry grinned. You like him. With a chuckle, Izuku began gathering up his papers, pens and Harry's contract. He would just have to get back to it later and hope for the best. They made it to class by the skin of their teeth. Barely seated before Moody clumped his way to the front of the class, and to everyone's surprise, announced he would be placing the Imperious Curse on each of them to see who had the strength to shake it off. But you said it's illegal, Professor, said Hermione uncertainly, as Moody cleared away the desks with a sweep of his wand, leaving a large clear space in the middle of the room. You said to use it against another human was. Dumbledore wants you taught what it feels like, said Moody, his magical eyes swiveling onto Hermione and fixing her with an eerie, unblinking stare. If you'd rather learn the hard way when someone's putting it on you so they can control you, completely fine by me. You're excused. Off you go. Cheeks turning rosy, Hermione ducked her head, muttering lowly that wasn't what she meant. Harry and Ron grinned in amusement but were quick to stop when Izuku scowled irritably at them. After all, if that was what Moody had told them initially, he didn't blame Hermione for being confused. Since we have a new face, Izuku is all, I presume. Izuku nodded. Perfect. I'll just give a quick recap on the Imperious Curse. The mind control curse, it was used quite a lot during the last war with you-know-who, and created quite a bit of trouble for the Ministry. Especially when trying to figure out who were actually under it. Now, Dumbledore wants you to learn how the curse feels, and we're both in agreement that with enough practice, you'll be able to shake it off. So, without further ado, paddle. Front and center. It was one of the craziest classes Izuku had ever been a part of, and that was saying something. UA weren't exactly a typical classroom standard. Green Eyes Whitey watched as Parvati Paddle did a dance about the room, pulling off a perfect ballet routine before being released from it. Dean Thomas pranced around the room thinking he was a chicken, and Ron gave a nice belt at singing opera. Down the list of students Moody went until he came to the last two. Harry and Izuku. Potter. Moody growled, you next. Harry moved forward into the middle of the classroom, into the space that Moody had cleared of desks. Moody raised his wand, pointed it at Harry, and said, Imperio. Izuku watched as his eyes clouded just like the others, but unlike the rest of the students, he didn't immediately jump into action. His body trembled, fingers twitching. He was definitely fighting it. Izuku itched to jump up and free him. He hated seeing the struggle on his face. Knew from Hitachi how it felt. After a moment, Harry bent his knees. The action reluctant. His muscles shook in protest, a frown knitting between his brows, and in an instant, it was over. As if two people were in control, Harry attempted to jump and stop himself at the same time, which unfortunately left him crashing straight into the table with a yelp. Izuku was over to him in an instant, helping him up and doing an injury assessment on autopilot, completely ignoring Harry's shocked squawk. Now, that's more like it. Moody growled out, expression glowing with triumph. Look at that, you Potter fraud. He fought it, and he damn near beat it. We'll try that again, Potter, and the rest of you, pay attention, watch his eyes. That's where you see it. Very good, Potter, very good indeed. They'll have trouble controlling you. No? Izuku snapped, green eyes slitted in fury. He's hurt. So, we won't be doing it again. Moody scowled, limping toward him, leaning heavily on his cane. That's how you learn, boy. You push through the pain. Can't see enough scars right there on your hand to know you know that. Izuku was fit to snarl. He didn't know why, but Moody had every inch of him feeling threatened, and damn it, it wasn't remotely the same thing. My injuries came from Quirk backlash. My arms are so badly damaged, anything further, and I could risk losing the use of them. It wasn't intended, and it's definitely not something I'd recommend. He's the only one to shake it off. Then try it on me, Izuku argued. Harry has bruised ribs at the very least after that stupid demonstration, so try it on me. And then he was going straight to his parents, because this was insanity. False eye shifting in his socket, lips twisted in a grimace, Moody cursed colorfully and gestured for Harry to back off. The 14-year-old was reluctant but did as he was told. Part of him wanted to continue. Prove he was capable, but his side was on fire, and he'd had enough rib damage, thanks to his great oath of a cousin over the years, that he suspected the bruising himself. With Harry out of harm's way, Izuku kept his gaze on Moody. This whole class hadn't sat right with him. Not since the moment Hermione had asked about the legality of teaching them such a lesson and disregarding a student's injury. Yeah, something wasn't right. Aizawa had often dismissed the entire class when Quirk training caused an injury, and remained with a student until he was damn sure they were okay. Yet, Izuku had often been under Hitoshi's brainwash during one-on-one battles, but his brother made a conscious effort not to hurt anyone, a fact Moody hadn't considered, should his students fight against some of the riskier mental suggestions. Raising his wand, Moody growled out, "Imperio." The strangest sensation washed over Izuku. Gentle as a warm hug, it felt completely different to what Hitoshi did and was a lot weaker. This was an unforgivable. The hull was as thin as paper, it was almost laughable. Curious, he waited to see what Moody would do, tugging minutely on the spell. The order whispered through his mind not a moment later. Spill your secrets. His mind recoiled at the invasive command. No doubt if Izuku was to answer, Moody could push the bullshit that he had meant, typical embarrassing teenage stories, but in his case, the secrets ran deep and weren't even his to tell. Everything, tell us everything, all your secrets. Stood between Ron and Hermione, ribs aching, Harry watched the same cloudiness engulf Izuku's gaze. Unlike the others, his body went completely rigid, fists clenched, and from the frustrated look on Moody's face, the green-haired teenager wasn't responding to his control. Suddenly, awareness bled back into Izuku's eyes, the boy grinning. No, Professor, I don't think I'll be doing that. Shock engulfing his features, Moody could only watch as Izuku gathered his belongings and grabbed the wrist of a flummoxed Harry, Ron and Hermione, following right behind him. Class isn't over. Moody spluttered. It is now. Izuku called back, door slamming behind them. Sing me home. Scrubbing at his exhausted eyes, Aizawa took a last glance at Eri and stepped from her room. The girl had been in dire need of a nap after a rough night, and he had been on the verge of begging, or straight-up bribery, when the kiddo finally conked out. She had always found it hard to sleep after what she had suffered, and a new place tended to disrupt her even further. Here's hoping she settled into her new routine at least before Christmas. In Severus's cozy little kitchen, Sirius sat with his eyes glued to the Daily Prophet, a mug of tea in his right hand. Hisashi was hilariously showing Romy how to make onigiri, and when he held out a fresh cup of coffee to Aizawa, the underground hero almost wept. Feeling rougher than usual, he was desperate for anything that would wake his brain. You look tired, Pop Sirius commented when Aizawa plopped down at the table with a grunt. Might be better with a nap yourself. I'm fine, Aizawa grunted, taking a bracing gulp of his coffee. I functioned on less sleep. Frowning, Sirius reached out to touch Aizawa's cheek, heart clenching when his son flinched away from him. Hey, sorry, Pop, you just look pale. Nothing I can't handle. Rolling his eyes at his husband's stubbornness, Hisashi set a plate of fresh onigiri on the table and poked Aizawa into the side, making him yelp. Don't be such a grump, babe. You do look a little pale. Too much worrying and too much coffee. Don't make me cut you off. Eyes widening, Aizawa shielded his mug. You wouldn't dare. Try me, babe. We both know Papa will do it, Hitoshi commented, as he entered the kitchen, Katsuki trailing after him. Do you not remember 3 years ago? I certainly do. Dad without coffee is something to behold. Sashi managed to convince every coffee shop within a 2-mile radius not to sell to me. Aizawa squawked. I had to beg people to pick me up coffee. It was humiliating. Sirius shook with mirth. Oh, sweet Merlin. How long did you keep it up? A month, Hisashi replied with a grin. Taught this cranky ass never to take his temper out on me again. Can have bad days, just don't punish others for it. Right, Katsuki. Katsuki stopped mid-bite of his onigiri. Hey. Shota. Hisashi. Hearing Izuku's frantic call, when that kid should have been in classes, instantly dropped the playful mood and had Aizawa and Hisashi rushing from the kitchen, Sirius, Hitachi and Katsuki right behind them. Harry, Sirius said, bemused to see his godson, along with Hermione and Ron bringing up the rear. What in Merlin's name you four should be in class? Harry's hurt. Hermione rushed out, scowling at her friend when the boy tried to shush her. Oh, stop it Harry, you are. Hero training kicking in, Aizawa was on the boy in a second, urging him to sit. Harry was reluctant to make a fuss, but after some gentle coaxing from the Japanese hero, he pulled open his robes and tugged up his jumper and shirt. Sirius instantly let loose a string of curses, because swaths of purple bruising had already covered Harry's right side, disappearing beneath his trousers. What the hell happened? Aizawa growled. Damn it kid, these ribs might be cracked. Izuku winced. I suspected bruising but that's looking worse than I thought. Explain, now. Aizawa barked, switching to his native tongue. In rapid-fire Japanese, Izuku explained how the lesson had gone, including Hermione's concern about illegal spell usage and Harry crashing into an oak table in an effort to shake off the curse, with Moody insisting on him doing it again, rather than examining him, or even getting Madame Pomfrey. When he delved into the spell being used on him, the rage on Aizawa's face could have melted steel. The pro-hero was beyond pissed. What in the name of Merlin? Sirius snarled furiously, Hisashi translating for him. And Moody claims Dumbledore cleared this shit. Apparently he wanted us to know how it felt, so we could break it, Izuku scoffed, not believing a word. With another burst of creative profanities, Sirius called for Romy and ordered her to retrieve Albus. The house elf looked reluctant, but the headmaster had told her to follow their orders. Popping out, she was back barely a second later with the Flummox wizard in tow, holding a cup of tea in one hand, and a half-eaten shortbread in the other. Sirius was on him in a second. Have you lost your Merlin-loving mind, Albus? Albus blinked in surprise. Sirius, my dear boy, my mind is quite intact, so could you please explain why you believe otherwise, and why 4 students are currently not in class? Because a moron disguised as a teacher practiced illegal magic on them, injuring a student. Aizawa seethed, inky hair lifting and eyes blazing red as his quirk activated. Safe, Dumbledore. You promised my kid would be safe and learn how to control his magic. At what point is he safe? Eyes widening in shock, Albus's gaze snapped to where Harry sat. Izuku stood protectively next to him, Hermione drawn at his back. Catching sight of the ugly bruising, the wizard sucked in a breath. What happened? Defense against the dark arts, that's the class you're supposed to in. What in Merlin's name did Alistair do? He had already been getting complaints about him. Minor mostly, although Augusta Longbottom was fit to disembowel him after Alistair had left poor Neville in great distress. Harry, tell me, and I swear he will never cause you harm again. Harry was surprised. He wasn't used to adults taking anything seriously, and Hogwarts had proven no different in the last 4 years. Not to the same extent as any other adult he ever dealt with, but they certainly were guilty of fobbing him off. But there was something about being around Izuku and his family that urged him to speak up, and speak up he did. By the time he finished, Albus was just as furious as Sirius and Izuku's family. I will deal with this, Albus promised, his anger radiating. You have my word and I apologize profusely for the harm that befell you. I never granted Alistair permission to use the curses on students. The man must be out of his mind. He'll be dismissed, Aizawa queried. Most assuredly, Albus stated firmly. It will take me time to organize a replacement, but I'd sooner have the classes cancelled for now, than continue letting him teach. Could let Shota at him, Katsuki commented with a devious smirk. Quite a few of your Meiji could do with being whipped into shape. Hitachi burst out laughing. I give them an hour. Harry, Hermione and Ron cried out together. We're sparing you, Izuku said sagely. His suicide sprints are murder. Rat. Have I missed an invite? It was honestly amusing watching Harry, Ron and Hermione jumping out of their skin, spinning around to face their potions professor. Arms crossed, Severus raised a brown question. Anyone care to explain why I just came upon a very irate Alistair Moody, raging about my grandson lacking manners? Oh yeah. Katsuki growled, hands sparking along with his temper. Maybe someone should feed that old bastard his wand. He's some balls on him to say anything after what he's done. And that would be? Severus asked confused. Oh, just little things. Sirius said, tone light, even as anger simmered in his gaze. Using the Imperious curse on students injuring one. What? Severus choked out incredulous, eyes snapping toward Albus. Albus. Please tell me Sirius is making yet another poor attempt at being funny. Unfortunately, not, Albus responded sadly. Alistair used the Imperious curse on the students, claiming that I had granted permission, so they would understand how it felt and eventually adapt to breaking the hold. Harry was injured during it when he managed to break the hold slightly. Severus groaned. So, his body attempted to do 2 things at once. That fool. I warned you, Albus, he wasn't a good fit. The man is too wrapped up in his constant vigilance mantra. He believes every shadow is ready to jump out and kill him. Shaking his head, Severus crossed the room and crouched down in front of Harry to examine the injury himself. Pressing long fingers against the bruising, he winced in sympathy when the boy yelped. "My apologies, Mr. Potter, but you've at least 2 cracked ribs. Mr. Weasley, Miss Granger, could you escort him to the infirmary?" Baffled, Harry wasn't sure what to say. Severus was being downright paternal, and his equally flummoxed friends could only nod before helping him to his feet. Obviously finding himself a parent and a grandparent had softened the infamous dungeon bat. He looked longingly at his godfather, Sirius throwing him a grin. "We'll talk soon, Harry. Get the ribs looked after. I'll hold you to that, Sirius." Once the golden trio left, Severus blew out a breath and threw himself ungracefully onto the couch. "I want the whole story, and Albus, I promise nothing on hexing that bastard into oblivion." By the time Izuku finished explaining, Severus was fit to eat glass. Lunging to his feet, he cursed colorfully and then figured to hell with it. With Albus calling his name, he stormed from his quarters and took off back toward where he had last seen Alistair Moody. The brute must have been out of his blasted mind. Unforgivable spells used on children, and not just any children, his grandchildren. He may have only been aware of his grandparent's status for a few days, but Merlin be damned, the bond took Quirk. Students scattered at the sight of him. Most knew to leave the man be, but even Slytherins dodged when they saw the thunderous look on the face of their head of house. Eyes wide as they scurried off to their last class of the day. Even the Slytherins knew not to mess with him. Durmstrang and Beauxbaton's students also moved out of the way, curiously watching the potions master storm by. Catching sight of Moody entering the great hall, Severus picked up his steps. He didn't care there was about to be an audience. Teachers and students milled about, mostly their guests taking advantage of the space to work on assignments from their headmaster and headmistress, rather than sit in on random classes as they had been doing. But the instant Severus stepped in, all chatter died. And every gaze was locked on the furious wizard. As if sensing him, Moody turned, grunting as he situated himself, leaning heavily on his cane. "That grandson of yours go whining to you. Don't get your knickers in a twist, Snape. I was just due off." Honestly, Severus wasn't even sure what possessed him. Using his wand would have at least been less crude. But the minute the fool spoke, he saw red. There were gasps and startled yelps from the teachers and students, but Severus only had eyes for Moody. Nose bloodied, Moody set his furious gaze on the potions master. "Are you out of your mind? Severus, what in the name of Merlin has gotten into you?" Barely glancing at Minerva, Severus itched to pull his wand, but resisted as he flexed his aching fingers. "Tell me, Alistair, have you taken leave of your senses? Because honestly, that's the only blasted thing I could think of when my grandson told me you used an unforgivable on him and his classmates." "What?" Minerva spluttered, her outrage instantly redirected. "Alistair, please tell me Severus is attempting a joke." Alistair scoffed, pulling out a hanky to dab at his nose. "Getting your undies in a proper twist. It was good practice." They needed to understand how the Imperious curse felt. "You injured a student," Severus snarled. "Right now, he is getting cracked ribs mended. Something you should have done yourself the minute the boy hurt himself." "What is the fuss?" Karkaroff scoffed, stood with his students and rolling his eyes at Severus. "How else do you expect students to learn how to defend such spells? We begin teaching ours from first year." "Not in Hogwarts," Minerva snapped. "Not only is it illegal, but it is highly dangerous magic. Sweet Morgana. Alistair, explaining it in theory is one thing, but you used it on students." "Who was injured, Severus?" "Mr. Potter," Severus answered. "I examined him myself. Not only was he hurt pretty badly, but this wretched fool expected him to go under the spell again, until my grandson stepped in. A disrespectful brat, that boy." Severus barked out a rare laugh. "Disrespectful? For what, Alistair? Stopping you from causing a minor further bloody injury. Do you even hear yourself?" "Oh, he does, he just doesn't care." Everyone's attention snapped toward the new voice. As always stalked forward, dark eyes narrowed in temper, and Severus noticed his son had donned his capture weapon. Albus and his Ashi were right behind him, and neither looked happy. "What on earth is going on here?" Madame Maxim demanded. "A squib daring to talk to a wizard in such a manner. How dare you?" "Mind your tone, Madame Maxim," Severus snarled. "That is my child you dare to insult." "No need to fret," Aucassin as always said breezily, a dangerous smile on his face. "I can handle myself against a mouthy magi. What's going on here is a teacher using not only harmful magic, but illegal magic on children, one of my children, and I will damn well have something to say about it. Hell, I'll put him on his ass for it." Alistair spluttered, barking a humorless laugh. "With not a whit of magic to access. How do you intend to do that, lad?" "That is enough." Albus snapped, blue eyes lit with a rare fury, as he stepped up next to Aizawa and Severus. "Alistair, if you could, I would like a word in my office." Nose still leaking, Alistair grumbled and reluctantly followed, Minerva right behind them. By sheer willpower, Aizawa resisted the urge to knock him flat. Hell, he was tempted to give in just to prove he could. Muttering in French, Madame Maxim went back to her students, ushering them from the hall. Karker off doing the same as he tossed out comments angrily in Bulgarian. Facing his mother now that it was just them and his husband, Aizawa chuckled. I'm guessing that busted nose was you. Severus flushed, straightening his robes with an embarrassed huff. It sort of happened. I had intended to hex him to hell and back, but it just didn't seem to be enough. What does Akasan mean? Aizawa blinked at the sudden topic change, pale cheeks turning crimson. Out of the corner of his eye he noticed his husband grinning. Bastard. He hadn't intended to say it, didn't even know he wanted to say it. But it had always been something he craved, so it sort of popped out. Whether Severus would accept it was another thing. All it means, well, it's Japanese for mother. Eyes widening in surprise, something warmed inside in Severus, a little smile tilting his lips. After 30 years, he figured he'd never hear that title, felt he didn't deserve it. But he wasn't about to refuse it. Oh. Well, I like it. Akasan it is. That easy acceptance filled a part of Aizawa's heart in a way nothing ever had. Akasan it is. Sing me home. Harry winced, watching Madame Pomfrey prod at his ribs, before pulling her wand to run a scan. Her face twisted in irritation. Merlin. Alistair, you foolish bastard. Mr. Potter, you've 3 cracked ribs and some bad bruising. Thankfully I can fix you up in an instant. Good to know, Harry breathed. This hurts more than breaking my arm in 2nd year. Ribs tend to be a bit more painful, since you have to breathe, and it aggravates it, Madame Pomfrey explained gently. You'll feel fine in just a tick. Harry waited patiently as she cast the spells. Relief flooded him within moments, his breath seized, and he watched in fascination as the horrendous bruising faded from black and dark purple to pale yellow. That's much better. I can't heal the bruising completely, so you will be tender for a day or 2. Madame Pomfrey said cheerfully. I'll give you a salve for the rest of it. As for Alistair, should I fire call the headmaster? No need, Madame Pomfrey, Hermione said, helping Harry sit up. We've already informed him. Good. Mad as a bag of cats, that man, but even this is crazy for him. Ron shook his head. Absolutely balmy. The spell felt awful. We all reacted immediately. Except Harry. Took him almost 10 minutes to do whatever it is Moody wanted, and even then he fought. That's nothing. Harry said excitedly, fixing his shirt and grinning. Did you see Izuku? The spell couldn't even hold him. To be fair, it's extremely weak magic. Head snapping toward the doors, Harry flushed at the sight of Izuku leaning against the door. His usual sunny smile on his face. How do you call magic like that, weak? Chuckling, Izuku made his way toward Harry's bed. My brother Hitachi. You saw his Quirk brainwashing. Let's just say, that spell has nothing on it. Thanks to extensive training I can shake Hitachi's Quirk. So, the Imperious curse wasn't all that hard. Seriously? Ron spluttered. Mate. That is amazing. I can't imagine fighting off something stronger. I thought we wouldn't see you till dinner, Izuku Hermione commented. Fussing over Harry, which the boys shooed away good-naturedly. Yeah, that was before my grandmother stormed out ready to murder Professor Moody. What? Oh, Merlin, Madame Pomfrey moaned. I wonder who I should prep for. My money is on either one. It's so weird watching Snape be so paternal, Ron said, shaking his head. He was outright nice to you, Harry. Izuku laughed. I've heard how cranky he can be. Is he really that bad? Yes. Hermione, Harry, Ron and Madame Pomfrey responded together, making Izuku laugh harder. Glad to see someone's having fun. Hearing the familiar dry tone, Izuku looked over to where Severus had stepped in, followed by Aizawa and his Ashi. By the bloody knuckles, I'm guessing diplomacy didn't win. Severus snorted. Who said diplomacy was ever on the table? Madame Pomfrey, I'm sure you'll be having Alistair shortly. Broken nose. Oh, Merlin Severus. Madame Pomfrey bemoaned. He's a retired auror, he could cause you trouble. In what capacity? Aizawa demanded from behind his mother, eyes rolling. I'm guessing he's about to be in a whole lot more trouble. Speaking of, how's Harry? Better now that I've healed his cracked ribs. Madame Pomfrey said with disgust. I'll say it again, mad as a bag of cats, that man. The teenagers chuckled amongst themselves. Leaving the adults to it, the 4 headed out. They all wanted to drop their belongings at Gryffindor Tower before heading to dinner. Thank you, Harry said, walking up ahead with Izuku as they made their way through the halls. Izuku blinked. For what? For getting me help. Harry sighed, looking ahead to his friends. Hermione is too stuck on the rules, and Ron tends not to question anything once it's been supposedly passed by the headmaster. But you did. Izuku shrugged. Just because they're teachers, doesn't mean they're always right. Encouraging something harmful after you've already been injured is idiotic. Hell. Encouraging magic that is illegal is downright villain behavior. Harry wasn't used to people defending him like that. Oh, his 2 best friends had his back, but when it came to Hogwarts staff, yeah, they tended to give the teachers the benefit of the doubt way too often. Unless it was Ron and involved Slytherins. I think we want to trust our teachers. Even with this stupid tournament, where I don't even meet the age parameters. Coming up short, Izuku groaned, smacking his forehead. He was such an idiot. Darting by the confused trio, he promised he'd see them all at dinner and rushed toward the library. He had read every book in regard to the Triwizard Tournament, but had misunderstood one detail. If he was right, he just needed to double-check a tiny binding spell. Sing me home. Yawning, Hitachi made his way through the halls. The odd gaze from students followed him. Curious, mostly. They had thankfully gotten over whatever misguided terror had engulfed them, thanks to their Transfiguration professor, not knowing how to manage a situation with some decorum. Technically, he wasn't supposed to wander on his own, but Kasuki had already broken that rule, and since the only chaperone available was babysitting Eri and couldn't really leave their quarters anyway, he figured he'd risk it. The library was pointless. As much as magic intrigued him, he wasn't interested in reading up on a topic he couldn't use. A breeze catching his attention, Hitachi noticed a window was open. The sun had already nearly set, but a walk sounded nice. Jumping out, he landed with a soft grunt and looked about. Catching sight of a lake, he started off toward it. It was certainly colder than he was used to. Probably should have grabbed a jacket on his way out, but that's what happened when you did things on the fly. In the distance he could hear the owls from the owlery and sounds he didn't recognize from the Forbidden Forest. Severus had given them the lecture on approaching it, and after Izuku had gotten on the wrong end of the chimera, he wasn't about to go against him. At the lake's edge, he crouched and reached out to run his digits over the calm water. That is probably not a good idea. Dumping at the thick Bulgarian accent, Hitachi lurched upright, purple eyes landing on a boy wading through the lake. He was broadly built. Thick muscle visible beneath sallow skin, with eyes so dark they looked black and dark military cropped hair. Frowning, he backed up a little. You're saying that, while in the water. I'm not worried about that as in here coming after me, the boy responded with a grin. I am Victor Crumb. You are one of the brothers of the green-haired boy, yes? Hitachi Aizawa, the younger teen, introduced. You're one of the students from the other schools. Nodding, Victor moved toward the bank and stepped out of the water. He wore a pair of swimming shorts, and at his full height he was easily 6'3". It wasn't often Hitachi felt small around anyone. That brings you out here. Is dinner not soon? I know you sometimes eat in the hall. Hitachi blinked in surprise. Yeah, whenever meals in our quarters get dull I suppose it's hard to miss our habits when we stand out. Victor grinned. Well, yours. I noticed you. A beautiful man like you is hard to miss. Startled, Hitachi's cheeks blazed red. He wasn't used to romantic attention and certainly not from such a stunning male. Oh yeah, he had nothing articulate to respond with. You're a shy one. A polite way of saying he was a blubbering mess. Messing with the curl of his purple hair, Hitachi shrugged. I'm not a talkative type. I am not usually either, Victor admitted. Any particular reason you're out here? Hitachi asked curiously. I know this school has some nice baths, and I'd think November is a little cold for swimming in a lake. True, Victor commented, pulling out his wand from the thigh holster and casting a drying spell. Unfortunately, these Hogwarts girls seem intent to follow me about. It has gotten irritating. I doubt telling them outright I'm gay will make much of a difference. Hitachi winced. I noticed when I was out doing some of my morning training. Whole groups trailing behind you the last couple of mornings. I can see where that would get annoying. Immensely. Victor sighed, and catching sight of one of his classmates, he waved in greeting. Reaching out and taking Hitachi's hand, he pressed a kiss against his knuckles. Till we speak again, Hitachi. Part stuttering, Hitachi watched the older boys start back toward the castle. Hoping they would speak again, Hitachi continued on his walk, a smile on his face. Sing me home. Massive dishes of food appeared through the tables, chatter filled the great hall as everyone began to fill their plates, and ghosts moved between the tables, calling out greetings as they passed. Harry craned his neck, frowning. Aizawa, Hisashi, Kasuki, Hitachi and Eri sat at the extra table added on to the top table, eating and chatting away to each other, but there was no sign of Izuku. None of the trio had seen him since he took off. Where do you think he is? Hermione asked, noticing where Harry's gaze was locked. Library? Ron suggested. That was such a Hermione Granger moment. Where he figured out something and had to confirm it first before telling anyone. It is better knowing you are 100% correct, rather than making a fool of yourself. Hermione hissed in embarrassment, cheeks flushed pink. I never said otherwise. Ron defended, completely oblivious as to how he offended her. Chuckling at their antics, Harry glanced around again. Every now and again he caught a flash of the ridiculous Potter Stinks badges. Rolling his eyes at the obnoxious giggles of students older than him, only to jump when Aizawa suddenly crouched down beside him. Blimey. Harry croaked, just about swallowing his startled yelp. Warner bloke, Shota. Sorry, kid, Aizawa chuckled. Just wanted to see if any of you saw Izuku. Kasuki is about ready to ransack the school. Wincing, Harry glanced by him and sure enough, Kasuki was arguing lowly with Hitachi, while it looked like Hisashi was trying to calm him down. We haven't seen him since he came to find us in the infirmary. He said something about him being an idiot, that he needed to check something, and then he ran off. Frowning, Aizawa righted himself. That would have been nearly 2 hours ago, so where? Everyone jumped when the main doors were thrown open and Izuku rushed in, cheeks flushed and eyes bright. Aizawa called out to him, but his problem child had his sights set on only one thing, and that was the goblet of fire sat at the top of the hull, fire flickering lowly, as it would continue to do until the tournament ended. Confused gazes followed, voices calling out, only to grow more frantic when the teenager pressed a hand to the goblet, whispering, "Pedo Inchuri." Screams filled the hull when blue flames suddenly erupted from the goblet and surrounded Izuku. Those claws scrambled away from the blaze, whereas Aizawa, Hisashi, Kasuki and Hitachi ran straight for it, but couldn't get near it. The heat was too much. Out of desperation, Aizawa activated his quirk, but unlike usual magic, it didn't shut it off. There was nothing he could do. His kid was trapped. Dazed, Izuku wasn't sure what happened. The fire had surrounded him in a burst. Momentarily blinded, he waited to be burned to death. Instead, a warm chuckle filled his ears. Eyes opening slowly, he blinked in surprise. All around was white and gray. White grass, mountains in white and shades of gray, and slap in the middle was a large throne. A woman made entirely of blue flame sat upon it. "What brings you to my domain, young one?" Her voice was warm, rich, inviting. Taking a step forward, Izuku wasn't even sure where to begin. "You're aware of everything going on, I'm guessing." The fiery being smiled, her blue hair flickering as she chuckled. "Oh, very much so. It is always amusing to watch. Especially when these creatures insist on keeping me trapped. I need something to keep me entertained." "Trapped?" Izuku asked, surprised. "You're a prisoner." "Indeed, I am." Smiling, she stood fluidly, her flaming gown sizzling as she walked. "My name is Kalida, and I am a fire spirit who was unfortunate enough to end up bound by a wizard back in the 13th century. All the power I possess, and all he wanted me for, was to power an accursed goblet to play an equally cursed game. Can anyone free you?" Kalida blinked, the fire spirit genuinely surprised. Her expression went soft. "Oh, young one, unfortunately no. The binding involved requires a very tricky spell, and the blood of the wizard's family line, which has changed so much I wouldn't know where to start." Izuku deflated a little. "Oh, fret not, young one," Kalida promised gently. "But thank you. Now, why not tell me why you are here?" He didn't want to leave it. He wanted to help her, but Harry was priority. This tournament, the rules and parameters are stated by the wizards hosting it, and woven through the contract with binding spells ones I guess you power. Kalida nodded. "Honestly, they could do it without me, but my power can't be broken. But it can be bent, so young one, what is it you need?" "My friend Harry Potter," Izuku explained. "He was bound just like the others the minute his name left the goblet." "Something of which still burns me," Kalida scoffed, flames blazing white for a moment as her temper spiked. "Something else forced me to call his name. I'm still trying to figure out what, but yes, he is now bound like the others." "What if he doesn't meet the chosen parameters?" Kalida frowned. "Such as?" "Harry doesn't meet the age requirements," Izuku said hurriedly. "There was a 17 and over age restriction placed in the contract binding spells, but Harry is only 14. So, I need to know about the Guardian Clause." "The Guardian Clause," Kalida repeated. "Young one, the clause has never been activated, simply because the Guardian must be a volunteer, and they must assist without using their magic. No wizard or witch has ever been willing to do such a thing." "I am," Izuku stated firmly. "I volunteer to stand as Harry's guardian in this tournament." She saw it. The truth in his heart. There was no fear, and raw pride filled her. "Oh, you are just a wonder. Fine. It is my right to allow it, and I shall. On one condition: do not speak of my existence. Young one, I'd sooner not have others dwell on my shackled life. But I am grateful for this time. It was nice to speak to someone again. I wish there was more I could do." Kalida grinned. "Oh, the chaos you are about to cause will do me just fine. Farewell." In a sudden rush of blue flame, Izuku was tossed back. Everything swirled until his mind couldn't take it, and the dark took him. Feeling useless, Aizawa watched as the wizards and witches tried everything they could think of to break through the storm of blue fire. The students were kept back, but some of the older years also attempted to break through. Even Bobatons and Durmstrang tried, yet nothing helped. Then suddenly, it stopped. The storm of flame dissipated. Izuku, floating above the ground, had thrown back in a howl as light blazed over his right shoulder and arm. From the goblet, something erupted and floated down to Albus, just as Izuku fell to the ground, and the goblet went still once more. Aizawa, Hisashi, Hitachi and Kasuki, with Eri on his hip, rushed toward the green-haired teenager. Steam rising from his arm, his sleeve gone, Izuku slowly got upright. His ears rung and he ached all over. "Baby?" Dropping to his knees and cupping his face, Aizawa searched him for injury. He very rarely used pet names, but they slipped out when he was quite frazzled. "Look at me, baby, are you okay?" Izuku winced a little. "I'm fine." His arm. What was wrong with his arm? Hell, what could possibly make it worse? His right arm was already littered with severe scarring as it was. Daring to look, Izuku's green eyes went wide, because where his sleeve had been, the fabric had burned away, and from his shoulder to his hand were blue flames tattooed into his skin. The scars remained, hidden out within the ink that seemed alive against his flesh. What did you do, nerd? Katsuki barked. What the hell is going on? He invoked the guardian clause. At Albus's words, there were startled gasps and muttered confusion. Getting upright, Aizawa's gaze narrowed. What does that mean? Scrap of paper in hand, Albus read out the words scrawled upon it. As invoked, Izuku Aizawa shall stand as guardian of Harry Potter throughout the tournament, so mote it be. What? Karkaroff blustered angrily. It is bad enough your school ended up with a second champion, but now he gets help. This is absurd. Madame Maxim screeched. Surely it is against the rules. It isn't, Izuku croaked, getting up and stumbling a little. Harry didn't meet the contract parameters. I have the right to invoke the clause, and the goblet gets to deny it or accept it. It accepted. Another burst of uproar, and having enough, Hisashi activated his quirk, his voice reverberating throughout the great hall. Sea Islands. Quiet was instant. The blonde very rarely got angry, but when he did, he was scary. Are you lot serious, right now? Harry ended up tossed in a tournament that you deemed dangerous enough to place an age restriction, and then did nothing to fix it. My kid comes up with a solution to help keep him alive and you get pissy. You should be thanking him. How's getting another wizard to help fare? Karkaroff barked. An older wizard at that, with more magical ability. He can't use magic. Aizawa spun toward his mother, eyes widening in horror. He would. Severus sighed. The guardian clause. Not only must the guardian volunteer, but he also agrees not to use his magic. Are you insane? Nerd Katsuki exploded in Japanese, gaze livid. You heard Severus, this shit is dangerous. There are nearly always deaths. I'm aware, Kakin Izuku responded dryly. I'm also quite strong without magic. Or did you think All Might had me carrying fridges for fun? They had a giant in one of them. Hitachi hissed. Sirius told me. I have a quirk. I still don't like it. Aizawa argued. Damn it, problem child, does it always have to be you? If I didn't try, then I couldn't call myself a hero, Dad. Aizawa blinked in shock. He was used to being dad to Hitachi and Eri, but Izuku and Katsuki weren't there yet, and he wasn't sure they ever would be. Izuku looked a little stunned that he had said it. Reaching out, Aizawa pulled him into a tight hug. I know, kiddo, I just don't like this. But I got you and so does your papa. Smiling, Izuku cuddled into his warmth. Thank you, Dad. Karkaroff and Maxim were still furious, but knew arguing was pointless. To their irritation, no rules were broken, and the goblet was powerful binding magic. At Albus's coaxing, everyone returned to their meals. Conversation settling back to normal. Izuku took a seat next to Harry, ignoring Katsuki's gesture to come to their table. He knew his brother had more to say, but he needed to talk to Harry. Are you crazy? Harry spluttered, green eyes wide behind his glasses. You said you'd help, but this? I don't want you getting hurt because of me. I'm a big boy, Harry, Izuku said, filling up his plate. I wanted to help and I am. People die in this. So, I've been told. With a sigh, Izuku looked down at Harry. I don't plan to die in this, Harry, and I'm making damn sure you don't either. Harry was completely flummoxed. No one went this out of their way for him. Not his friends, his teachers, and certainly not his family. Merlin, they'd be happy to see him squashed in the tournament. He wanted to argue, convince Izuku to take it back, but the relief he felt was immense. He wouldn't have to do it alone. Thank you. Smiling warmly, Izuku nudged him gently. You're welcome. But just so you know, I expect you to keep my ass alive too. Laughing, Harry nodded. You got it, mate. From at the top table, Severus watched his grandson converse with Harry, and wanted to strangle Albus. Albus, what the hell are you thinking allowing this? I agree. Minerva spat, equally pissed. Bad enough you let Potter be used like a piece of meat, why encourage yet another underage student getting involved? I do not exactly have a choice here, Albus retorted. Izuku was clever enough to go to the goblet, meaning it is now binding. The tournament must go ahead, and the boys will have to compete. This whole thing is proving to be a disaster, Minerva groaned, pinching the bridge of her nose. Potter entered into a tournament capable of killing grown wizards, Alistair removed from the grounds by Aurors, and now Izuku trapped by the contract. Your promises keep coming up short, Dumbledore. Wincing, Albus turned his gaze toward Aizawa. Oh, dear Merlin, he was clearly furious. I never intended for this, Shota. I didn't even know Izuku was helping Harry with the contract. Contrary to belief, I am not everywhere, my dear boy. Why hold such a suicidal competition in the first place? Aizawa hissed. I kept my nose out, but my kid is involved, so call the damn thing off. He can't, Severus interjected gently. It's magically binding, Shota, we can't stop it. Damn it, Akasan. Why? I read the damn rules. No one can interfere during tasks, unless the student forfeits. Aizawa shook his head in disgust. If my kid suffers for this, you will never see us again, that I can promise you. Before Severus can say a word, Aizawa turned on his heel and stalked out. The door slammed audibly in his wake. Sing me home. Sat by the fire, honestly bored out of his skull, Sirius flipped through one of Severus's many potions books. The house elves had kindly brought him dinner, which he devoured with gusto, and now he was killing time until his family returned. Or at least figure out his next move. Severus was jumpy around him. The kiss hadn't been repeated, and in hindsight he might have moved a little too fast. He wasn't sure where to even begin, but torturing himself with his blitz thoughts was better than the alternative. Shifting into his dog form and hunting down Alistair to use as a chew toy for funsies. When the door burst open, he couldn't help but yelp, book tumbling to the floor, and blinked at the sight of his son stalking in, gaze livid. Shota. Hey pup, what is it? Aizawa could barely hear his father. His veins ran red hot and pounding in his ears. When the smaller man grasped his shoulders, he instinctively activated his quirk, eyes blazing red. Easy, kiddo, easy, you're safe. Shutting his quirk down, Aizawa pulled from his grip. I'm fine. The hell, you are serious, snorted. You're paler than normal and look ready to take on a mountain troll just to soothe your temper. So, talk, pup, what's going on? Shaking, Aizawa dropped down on the couch. It wasn't like him to get this damn emotional, but everything was on high definition, and he could barely stand it. Finding his birth parents, discovering the magical world, learning Izuku was a wizard, and now this. It was too much. He didn't even realize he was crying, until Sirius crouched down in front of him and cupped his face, thumb catching a tear. What is it, pup? Sirius asked gently. Talk to me. With a tired whimper breaking free, Aizawa dropped his head onto Sirius's chest. Stiffening at first, Sirius mentally kicked his own ass, and with a tug, ended up sat on the floor, his only child in his lap, trembling from each sob that tore free. Rocking him, Sirius rubbed his back and spoke soothingly, anything to calm him down. By the time the tears had dried up, Aizawa was thoroughly mortified. Sorry, I blubbered all over you. Chuckling, Sirius helped him to his feet. If you can't sob all over your dad, who can you sob over? Now, pop, care to fill me in? Scrubbing at his face, Aizawa cursed. Damn it all to hell. I'm blaming my breakdown on stress. Izuku activated something called the Guardian Claws to help Harry. Sirius spluttered in shock. He did what swearing a blue streak, the wizard just about reigned in his magic, temper flaring. Morgana's saggy tits. I told Albus that stupid tournament was going to cause mayhem. Akasan, he said there's no way to stop it, Aizawa said miserably. Sirius sighed and nodded. Unfortunately, your mother is right, everything is bound by the goblet. It's extremely powerful magic, Harry, and now Izuku will have to compete. I'm so sorry, pup. Damn it, Aizawa hissed. They're just kids, a thousand. Father. Everything in Sirius swarmed. After hearing about Severus's new title, he had taken the time to find out what father would be in Japanese. The term left him all gooey. I know, pup, but listen to your old Atausen, we'll get them through this. Embarrassed by his emotional meltdown, Aizawa shoved it down, smirking playfully. We really need to work on your Japanese, Atausen, you and Akasan both actually. Before you butcher the language completely. Throwing his head back, Sirius laughed heartily. Oh, you got it, kiddo. Sing me home. Pulled from potions the next day for something called the Weighing of the Wands, Izuku and Harry followed an overly exuberant Colin Creevy to a fairly small classroom. Most of the desks had been pushed away to the back of the room, leaving a large space in the middle. 3 of them, however, had been placed end to end in front of the blackboard and covered with a long length of velvet. 5 chairs had been set behind the velvet-covered desks, and Little Bagman was sitting in one of them, talking to a witch neither Harry nor Izuku had seen before. In the corner, Victor stood moodily, not up for conversing with any of the others, while Cedric and Fleur chatted to each other. Ah, here he is. Champion number 4. And the new appointed guardian. I say, boys, you've given our heads quite the spin. And you come, Harry, and you come ... and you are Izuku Aizawa, yes. Little Bagman, pleasure to meet you, nothing to worry about, it's just a wand weighing ceremony, the rest of the judges will be here in a moment. Wand weighing? Harry repeated nervously. We have to check that your wands are fully functional, no problems, you know, as they're your most important tools in the tasks ahead, said Bagman. The expert's upstairs now with Dumbledore. And then there's going to be a little photo shoot. This is Rita Skeeter, he added, gesturing toward the witch in magenta robes. She's doing a small piece on the tournament for the Daily Prophet. ... Maybe not that small, Ludo said Skeeter, her eyes on Harry and Izuku. I wonder if I could have a little word with Harry and Izuku before we start. The youngest champion, you know, and his guardian. ... to add a bit of color. Certainly, cried Bagman. That is if Harry and Izuku have no objections. Lovely, said Skeeter, a moment before her scarlet taloned fingers sank into Harry's upper arm in a surprisingly strong grip. Drag was the only word to describe it, and Izuku followed with an irritated scowl on his face. We don't want to be in there with all that noise. Let's see ... Ah, yes, this is nice and cozy. Izuku raised a brow. Was she serious? It was a broom cupboard. It just about fit the 3 of them, and only because neither he nor Harry were all that big. Come along, dear, that's right, you too, Izuku lovely, said Skeeter as she perched herself precariously upon an upturned bucket, pushing Harry down onto a cardboard box, and closing the door, throwing them into darkness. Let's see now ... Unsnapping her crocodile skin handbag, she pulled out a handful of candles, which she lit with a wave of her wand and magicked into midair, so that they could see what they were doing. You won't mind, boys, if I use a quick quotes quill. It leaves me free to talk to you normally. But what? Izuku asked, glancing at Harry who looked just as confused. Skeeter's smile widened, Izuku counting 3 gold teeth among the white. She reached again into her crocodile bag, and drew out a long acid green quill and a roll of parchment, which she stretched out between them on a crate. Putting the tip of the green quill into her mouth, Skeeter sucked it for a moment with apparent relish, then placed it upright on the parchment, where it stood balanced on its point, quivering slightly. Testing ... My name is Rita Skeeter, Daily Prophet reporter. The moment Skeeter had spoken, the green quill started to scribble, skidding across the parchment, Harry and Izuku watching in amazement as it scrawled. Attractive blonde Rita Skeeter, 43, his savage quill has punctured many inflated reputations. Lovely, said Skeeter, yet again, ripping the top piece of parchment off and stuffing it into her handbag. So, Harry, let's start with you. What made you decide to enter the Triwizard Tournament? Said Harry again, but he was distracted by the quill. Even though he wasn't speaking, it was dashing across the parchment, and in its wake he could make out a fresh sentence. An ugly scar, souvenir of a tragic past, disfigures the otherwise charming face of Harry Potter, his eyes. Ignore the quill, Harry, said Skeeter firmly. Reluctantly, Harry looked up at her instead. Now, why did you decide to enter the tournament, Harry? I didn't, said Harry. I don't know how my name got into the Goblet of Fire. I didn't put it in there. Skeeter raised one heavily penciled eyebrow. Come now, Harry, there's no need to be scared of getting into trouble. We all know you shouldn't really have entered at all. But don't worry about that. Our readers love a rebel. But I didn't enter, Harry repeated. I don't know who. How do you feel about the tasks ahead? Skeeter continued, barreling over him. Excited. Nervous. I haven't really thought ... Yeah, nervous, I suppose, Harry responded, his insides squirming uncomfortably as he spoke. Champions have died in the past, haven't they? Skeeter said briskly. Have you thought about that at all? Izuku stiffened, green eyes narrowing in annoyance. Her callous attitude was beginning to piss him off. He just about swallowed a snide comment that was dying to wiggle free. Well ... They say it's going to be a lot safer this year. Of course, you've looked death in the face before, haven't you? Skeeter asked, watching him closely. How would you say that's affected you? Said Harry, yet again. Do you think that the trauma in your past might have made you keen to prove yourself? To live up to your name? Do you think that perhaps you were tempted to enter the Triwizard Tournament because... I didn't enter, said Harry, starting to feel irritated. Can you remember your parents at all? No, said Harry. How do you think they'd feel if they knew you were competing in the Triwizard Tournament? Proud. Worried. Angry. Harry was feeling really annoyed now. How on earth was he to know how his parents would feel if they were alive? He could feel Rita Skeeter watching him very intently. Frowning, he avoided her gaze and looked down at words the quill had just written. Tears filled those startling green eyes as our conversation turns to the parents he can barely remember. I have not got tears in my eyes, said Harry loudly. That's enough, Izuku snapped angrily. Gaze snapping toward Izuku, Skeeter grinned in delight. Well, aren't you impatient? Fair enough. I've heard some things about you. Grandchild to Severus Snape. I bet that was a surprise. And you're relevant to the tournament. Laughing, Skeeter twisted to face the teenager better. Oh, you're a feisty one. So, barely in the wizardry world a few days and already getting involved in quite the shenanigans. So, the Guardian Clause care to explain what happened when you invoked it? Not particularly, Izuku replied coldly, unwilling to give her an inch. All you need to know is, it was invoked, and I'll be standing alongside Harry during this tournament. Before Skeeter could say a word, the door of the broom cupboard was pulled open, and the boys looked around, blinking in the bright light. Albus Dumbledore stood there, looking down at the three of them, squashed into the cupboard. Dumbledore, cried Skeeter, with every appearance of delight, even as everything vanished into her ugly-looking crocodile skin bag. How are you? I hope you saw my piece over the summer about the International Confederation of Wizards Conference. Enchantingly nasty, said Albus, his eyes twinkling. I particularly enjoyed your description of me as an obsolete dingbit. I was just making the point that some of your ideas are a little old-fashioned, Dumbledore, and that many wizards in the street. I will be delighted to hear the reasoning behind the rudeness, Rita. Albus interrupted with a courteous bow and a smile, but I'm afraid we will have to discuss the matter later. The weighing of the wands is about to start, and it cannot take place if one of our champions is hidden in a broom cupboard. Delighted to escape, Harry grabbed Izuku's hand and hurried back into the room. Grabbing the remaining seats next to Cedric, looking up at the velvet-covered table, where 4 of the 5 judges were sitting: Professor Karkaroff, Madame Maxim, Mr. Crouch, and Ludo Bagman. Harry hastily explained to Izuku who Crouch was, and to both their irritation, Skeeter had made herself comfy, her quick-quotes quill already on the rampage. May I introduce Mr. Ollivander? Said Albus, taking his place at the judges' table and talking to the champions. He will be checking your wands to ensure that they are in good condition before the tournament. For the most part, Izuku sat back and watched as Ollivander went from champion to champion, and gave each wand a thorough examination. Izuku's own cypress wood wand was holstered beneath his robes, and according to Severus, it would be held by the judges during each task. A fact his parents were freaking out over. Although Katsuki's freakout was far more creative. Apparently a seance would be involved, or several of them, after Harry killed his ghost a few times. Izuku wasn't sure, but the rant was spectacular. Harry stepped back, the last to have his wand examined, and Albus stood, smiling pleasantly. You may go back to your lessons now, or perhaps it would be quicker just to go down to dinner, as they are about to end. Photos, Dumbledore, photos, cried Bagman excitedly. All the judges and champions, oh, and Mr. Potter's guardian, what do you think, reader? Yes, let's do those first, Skeeter agreed, her eyes locked on Harry again. And then perhaps some individual shots. The photographs took a long time. Madame Maxim cast everyone else into shadow wherever she stood, and the photographer couldn't stand far enough back to get her into the frame. Eventually she had to sit while everyone else stood around her. Karkaroff kept twirling his goatee around his finger to give it an extra curl. Crumb, whom Harry would have thought would have been used to this sort of thing, skulked, half hidden, at the back of the group. The photographer seemed keenest to get Fleur at the front, but Skeeter kept hurrying forward and dragging Harry into greater prominence. Then she insisted on separate shots of all the champions. When they were finally free to go, Harry and Izuku all but ran out the door. They waited until they were far enough away before speaking, Izuku the first to talk. Well, that was an experience, the green-haired teenager commented. Are you okay? Me? Harry asked, confused. Sure, why wouldn't I be? The fact she so coldly started spewing that stuff about your parents. Doesn't that bother you? With a sigh, Harry stopped by a random statue, leaning against it and trying to find the words. It bothers me, but I don't see the point in dwelling on it. It won't exactly make people stop. They still ask, still act like it's their business. That my entire life is their right. When I first came here, everyone knew more about my life than I did. Izuku frowned. How? My aunt and uncle, they lied to me about everything. Hid the fact I'm a wizard. They never wanted me to come here. It wasn't until Hagrid was sent to find out why I wasn't getting my letters when I was 11 that I even knew magic was real. But, does your family have quirks? It's not all that different from magic. Harry laughed. Oh yeah, my aunt has enhanced hearing, Uncle Vernon has fast fingers, great with typing apparently, and my cousin Dudley has a weaker version of my uncle's quirk, not that he uses it for anything beyond the TV remote or his stupid video games. When it was apparent I was clearly quirkless, they were furious. It wasn't until later, when I learned that I was a wizard, I realized why. Being quirkless meant it was more likely I'd have magic, and they hate magic. Izuku studied him, something cold sinking into his stomach. They abuse you, don't they? Startling, Harry looked at him, wide-eyed. Why would you ask that? I'm training to be a pro hero, Harry. I know what abuse and neglect looks like. Hell, I've seen it on my brothers. Neither came from great situations. Izuku's gaze was gentle as he spoke. You don't have to tell me, but I'm here if you want to. No pushing, no demands. It was wonderful. Smiling, Harry thanked him, and the pair set off for dinner. Whatever crazy was going down, at least they were in it together. Izuku had never been so happy to see his bed. Barely listening to his dorm mates getting ready to call it a night, the teenager sluggishly undressed. His newly acquired magical tattoo shifted over his skin, warm against his flesh, and he was very aware of Harry's presence. Something he was still getting used to. Ever since the goblet spat him back out, he seemed to have a line to the boy's emotions. He hadn't noticed right away, but as hours ticked by throughout the night and following day, he was aware of a constant niggle. It wasn't until Harry's temper flashed hot from Skeeter's goading, he even realized what it was. All through dinner, he chewed over how to tell him, but with Harry's emotions blaring, he figured to hell with finesse, he was getting a damn headache. Yanking on his comfiest t-shirt, Izuku made his way over to Harry's bed, crouched down and flicked him in the forehead. Boy. Harry yelped, eyes watering from the strike and rubbing at the sore spot. What the hell, mate? That hurt. That was the idea, Izuku said cheerfully, plopping down next to Harry. Your emotions are loud. Freezing, Harry blinked in horror. His gaze darted to the others, but they appeared to be minding their business as they climbed into bed. Looking back at Izuku, he asked shakily. Why you're feeling my emotions? Appears to be an interesting side effect of this, Izuku commented, gesturing at his tattoo. I've been feeling it all day. Didn't realize it at first, not until Skeeter pissed you off. I can shut it down mostly, but your emotions are kin to shouty. Groaning, Harry tipped back, throwing his arm over his face. Honestly, it was probably the least invasion of his privacy he had ever dealt with, and he could understand the reasoning in regard to the Guardian Clause. For whatever disaster you feel, I apologize in advance. Barking a laugh, Izuku smiled down at him. Count your blessings it's not running the other way. My train of emotions tend to be all over the place. Even for me. With a grunt, Harry shoved Izuku. Alright, off, we'll discuss this insanity tomorrow when my brain doesn't feel like mush. Till then, try and stay out of my feelings. With a chuckle, Izuku wished him good night and made his way back to his bed, relieved the younger boy wasn't angry with him. Curling up beneath his covers, he fell asleep to the soft snores of his dorm mates, and Harry's emotions brushing over his mind. Fool. Wait, what was this? Harry didn't understand what he was hearing, seeing it was blurry. A form slammed into the wall, making him jump. A protest ended on a choked gasp. My lord, please. You had one task. One. Something familiar tickled at the back of his mind. Why did he know this? Why? Blood running cold. It hit him. His dream. The manor dream from before he went to the Weasleys during the summer. With the recognition, clarity came, and Harry found himself in a lush room, fire crackling in the hearth. Eyes following choked breaths, his gaze fell on an unfamiliar man, clawing at an invisible force. My lord. He continued to gasp, legs kicking as he tried to pull down breaths. The boy Izuku Aizawa interfered. He ruined all of it. He is a child. You were bested by a child. A hiss from the rug, a huge snake shifted by the warmth of the fire. He had seen her before, the last time his mind dragged him to this mess, which meant the high-pitched fury he was hearing belonged to Voldemort. Insides running cold, Harry turned his gaze and just about choked back a scream. What was sat in the armchair wasn't human. A twisted-looking newborn, red eyes gleaming. He had a vague memory of seeing him in the first dream, but it hadn't stuck this time. He doubted it would leave his mind. Wormtail. Voldemort barked shrilly, his magic finally breaking and letting the stranger drop to the ground, hacking, even as he tried to fill his lungs. From a shadowed corner, Harry watched the meek wizard stumble forward with a whimper, before stuttering pathetically. Why yes, my lord. You must contact Malfoy at once. The boy, Izuku, he is a black by blood. According to this fool's mind, then the child should be with his true family. True family? Oh no, no. Malfoy's wife. She may have been a Malfoy by marriage, but she was a black by birth. Aizawa was a black, but no one knew that. Clearly Voldemort didn't. Malfoy? The stranger spluttered, coughing harshly. Why don't you just order that mutt to bring the boy here? And jeopardize his duty? Have you no sense? Voldemort spat. No discreet, legal means would be better than Dumbledore. The old fool won't be able to contest it. Damn it, damn it. He should have told Sirius about his dream during the summer. Fighting against his own mind, Harry begged himself to wake. He needed to wake, and on a gasp and a barely held scream, he pulled himself free. Bolting upright, sweat glistening on his skin, Harry sucked down frantic breaths. Scar on fire, he flinched violently when he realized someone was touching him. Easy, easy, mate, here you go. Ron, it was Ron. Accepting the glasses held toward him, Harry put them on with shaky hands. The red velvet curtains were shut, with a silencing charm no doubt in place, and on the bottom of his bed, Izuku sat, eyes wide with concern and pale as a ghost. Are you okay, Izuku? Harry croaked. Me? Izuku spluttered. Worry about you. Your emotions were screaming at me, and you were trashing. A nightmare, I'm guessing a bad one. Harry nodded, swallowing heavily. Yeah, and we need to talk to Sirius and Dumbledore. Merlin, anybody. Neither Ron nor Izuku argued. Harry was extremely shaken, and it was clear that they needed to involve an adult. Izuku was stunned when Harry produced a cloak that could make them invisible. Hundreds of questions bubbled up inside him, but he forced them down. After all, priorities. With Harry sandwiched between them, Ron and Izuku helped him along. It was quite the walk from Gryffindor Tower, all the way to Severus's quarters. By a miracle, they crossed no one, not even Filch or Mrs. Norris. If they had been out snooping, Harry doubted they would be so lucky. At the door, Izuku stepped from under the cloak and gave the password to a disgruntled portrait. The entrance had barely opened, before the three were rushing in. The sconces burst to life, and as if an alert had been sent ahead, Severus, Sirius, Aizawa and Hisashi rushed in pajamas and sleep rumpled. What in Merlin's name are you three doing up at barely 3 a.m.? Severus demanded. Harry had a nightmare, Sir Ron explained. Bad enough, we thought an adult was needed. Pup, you're white. Sirius rushed over, cupping Harry's face. And shaking Severus. Do you have a calming draft? With a flick of his wand, Severus summoned a vial, letting it drop straight into Sirius's hands. All right, Harry. Open up. Calm flooded Harry instantly. His shaking limbs settling down, color seeping back into his cheeks. Letting Sirius guide him to the couch, he startled when Hisashi pressed a hot cup of tea into his hands. Merlin, was he that out of it? Oh, by all means, take your time, Mr. Potter, Severus said dryly. Bacchus and Aizawa chided. Give him a chance to get his head straight. Something rattled him. Grateful, Harry took a bracing sip of his tea and started to talk. Once he did, it all poured out. The first dream in the summer, the dream tonight, the stranger and what Voldemort intended for Izuku. By the time he finished, he felt so much better and was even surprised when Severus retrieved a salve for his aching scar. What do we do? Hisashi demanded, color leached from his face. How do we protect Izuku? Surely this Malfoy creep has no power. His wife Narcissa is a black. Getting up, Severus paced. In the magical world, where a magical child is involved, a wizard or witch will hold more rights over a squib. We legally adopted Izuku. Aizawa spat. That means nothing in the magical world. Noticing the three teenagers were about to nod off, Hisashi put a stop to the discussion. They'd have to get to it once everyone had some sleep. On the way back to the tower, the boys didn't bother with the cloak. Chatting amongst themselves about their current problem, wondering if Aizawa being serious as son could protect Izuku, none of them noticed the eyes following. Sing me home. Hermione blinked when Ron, Harry and Izuku dropped down across from her at breakfast looking like roadkill. Good grief, did any of you sleep last night? The little Izuku grunted, trying not to face-plant it into his cornflakes. Nightmare. Harry explained, jaw cracking on a yawn. We'll fill you in later when there are no ears. Do you think Snape will take pity on us and let us nap in class? Ron asked, sluggishly reaching for the eggs. Izuku chuckled. His grandmother had softened quite a bit, but he doubted if he'd softened that much. Drowsy, the three boys jumped when in a swarm the morning post arrived, owls swooping in and down. Hedwig landed in front of Harry, and the 14-year-old instantly recognized Hagrid's scroll. Taking the letter, he gave Hedwig some crispy rasher to nibble, while he read. Dear Harry. Need you to meet me at my cabin with Izuku. Bring your cloak. Hagrid. It took Harry a minute to realize who Izuku was, and he cringed at the spelling. Hagrid obviously wrote Izuku's name how it sounded. Hagrid wants to meet us tonight at midnight. Blinking sleepily, Izuku read over the letter, wincing at his name spelling and groaned. Midnight, I plan to be dead in my pillow by then. What could he possibly want? Only one way to find out. Just be careful, Hermione urged. After breakfast, the four headed to potions. The Slytherins waited outside, wearing those ridiculous Potter Stinks badges, Malfoy right at the front, grinning smugly. Oh, here he comes, St. Potter and his new guardian mutt. Do you prefer Aizawa or black? I'd suggest black, for dignity's sake. Shove off, Malfoy. Ron barked. Harry was reaching for his wand, but a look from the green-haired teen paused him. Izuku tilted his head, green eyes watching Malfoy curiously. The blonde tried to act tough, but it fell flat. Unlike Kasuki or Hitachi, there was nothing about him that fired him up. If anything, he was pathetic. Laughing, Izuku didn't bother responding, moving toward where the rest of Gryffindor gathered. Pale cheeks reddening, Malfoy couldn't believe the nerve of the filthy half-blood. I'm talking to you. Trust me, everyone can hear you, Izuku responded with a smile. I know when someone is trying to goad me into a fight, Draco. I'm not an idiot. Just puffed up, Malfoy pulled out his wand, and Izuku was instantly alert. The amusement had gone from his eyes, muscles tensing beneath his robes. Don't you dare act like you're better than me. Malfoy snapped shrilly. Crossing his arms, Izuku couldn't help but notice similarities between Malfoy and Shigaraki. Both were too quick to temper when they thought they were being dismissed. What do you want, Draco? Your temper tantrums aren't worth my time, and I've no reason to fight you. Heart pumping, Malfoy was mortified. The other Slytherins were sniggering at his failure. Izuku was just as bad as that wretch St. Potter. Filthy, half-blood scummed in Sojo. Dodging the jet of light, green sparks flickered over Izuku's limbs, but before he could retaliate, Hermione's distressed whimper had him spinning around. Mouth covered, tears streamed from her face. Harry and Ron trying to see what was wrong. When they finally got her to drop her hands, Izuku gasped in shock. Her front teeth were growing out of control, creeping toward her chin and resembling a beaver. The Slytherins were doubled over, losing it. None of them heard Severus approach. What is going on here? Kasuki stood with him. He asked to sit in on a potions class out of curiosity, and seeing Hermione, he was instantly furious. Unlike his grandmother, he wasn't as polite when he spun around to the Slytherins. Which one of you jackasses need a lesson in manners? Enough, Kasuki, Severus admonished gently. Could you please bring Miss Granger to the infirmary? With a grunt, Kasuki nodded and went to Hermione, shielding her from the Slytherin sniggers. Come on, Curls. Let's go get you fixed up. Whimpering, Hermione cuddled into his side, as the pair of teens made their way up the corridor. Pinching the bridge of his nose, Severus cursed the migraine already nudging at his temples. Izuku, explain. Malfoy, the boy said with a snarl. He wasn't even remotely surprised, but as of last night, where decisions were made after the boys returned to Gryffindor Tower, he no longer had to gloss over it. 100 points from Slytherin. The outraged cry was almost worth worsening the thumping in his head, and the Gryffindor's expression was positively priceless. Silence. Unless you want me to take the same from each of you, get inside. Izuku heard grumbles of favoritism for him, but he knew it was his grandmother finally punishing the Slytherins the same as he would anyone else. Had finding his family changed things that much? Or was it something else? Getting started on antidotes, he ignored Malfoy's burning glares, and hoped Hermione was okay. Sing me home. Come dinner time, there was still no sign of Hermione. She was obviously still in the infirmary getting her teeth fixed. To Izuku's amusement, Kasuki wasn't with the rest of their family either, and from the grumbles of some of the Gryffindor girls, he wasn't the only one who noticed. Hoping to give the pair some quiet time, he convinced Ron and Harry to let Hermione rest, instead of heading to the infirmary after dinner. Somehow he managed to get them to start on their homework, and before long, it was time to go meet Hagrid. Sneaking out of the tower with Ron's help, Izuku and Harry huddled close under the invisibility cloak, making their way carefully through the school and outside. The grounds were mostly dark, speckled with moonlight creeping through the clouds. Light also poured from Hagrid's cabin and the Beauxbatons' carriage, Madame Maxim's loud voice carrying outside. Stopping at Hagrid's door, Harry knocked. "You there, Harry Izuku?" Hagrid whispered, opening the door and looking around. "Yeah, we are." Slipping inside the cabin, the boys pulled the cloak down off their heads. "Got some at her show ya," said Hagrid, brimming with excitement. "What are you showing us?" Izuku asked warily, thinking of Artemis and how that had ended. "Come with me, keep quiet, and keep yourselves covered with that cloak," Hagrid ordered firmly. "We won't take Fang, he won't like it." Doing as they were told, the boys made sure they were covered, hurrying after the man when he strode out of the cabin at a brisk pace. To their joint surprise, he was heading straight for the Beauxbatons' carriage. "Hagrid, what?" "SHHH. Hagrid hissed, knocking 3 times on a door bearing crossed golden wands. Madame Maxim opened it almost instantly, as if she had been by the door waiting. She smiled when she saw Hagrid. "Ah, agreed. It is time." So are," Hagrid replied in butchered French, beaming at her, and holding out a hand to help her down the golden steps. Madame Maxim closed the door behind her, taking Hagrid's offered arm, before they set off around the edge of the paddock containing her giant winged horses. Totally bewildered, Harry and Izuku ran to keep up with them. It seemed that Madame Maxim was in for the same treat as they were, because after a while she said playfully, "Where is it you are taking me, Agrid?" "You'll enjoy this," said Hagrid gruffly, "worth seeing, trust me. Onida on go tellin' anyone I showed ya, right? You're not supposed to know." "Of course not," said Madame Maxim, fluttering her long black eyelashes. The moonlit stroll continued, Harry and Izuku doing their best to keep up, both muttering in irritation. Both speculated it was a date they got dragged on, but when they had walked so far around the perimeter of the forest that the castle and the lake were out of sight, the boys heard something. Men were shouting up ahead, then came a deafening, ear-splitting roar. Hagrid led Madame Maxim around a clump of trees and came to a halt. Harry and Izuku hurrying to catch up, only for their jaws to hit the ground. Dragons. 4 fully grown, enormous, vicious-looking dragons were rearing onto their hind legs inside an enclosure fenced with thick planks of wood, roaring. Torrents of fire shooting into the dark sky from their open, fanged mouths, 50 feet above the ground on their outstretched necks. There was a silvery blue one with long, pointed horns, snapping and snarling at the wizards on the ground, a smooth-scaled green one, which was writhing and stamping with all its might, a red one with an odd fringe of fine gold spikes around its face, which was shooting mushroom-shaped fire clouds into the air, and a gigantic black one, more lizard-like than the others, which was nearest to them. At least 30 wizards, 7 or 8 to each dragon, were attempting to control them, pulling on the chains connected to heavy leather straps around their necks and legs. Izuku and Harry were horrified. "Keep back there, Hagrid," a wizard shouted toward them, straining on the chain he was holding. "They can shoot fire at a range of 20 feet, you know. I've seen this horntail do 40. "Isn't it beautiful?" said Hagrid softly. "It's no good," yelled another. "Stunning spells, on the count of 3. Stupefy." All around the camp, the dragons dropped, their bodies thudding to the ground, sending a tremble through the forest floor. The dragon keepers lowered their wands and set to work tending to their charges. "Want a closer look?" Hagrid asked Madame Maxim excitedly. The pair of them moved right up to the fence, and the boys followed. The wizard who had warned Hagrid not to come any closer turned, and Harry realized who it was. Charlie Weasley. "All right, Hagrid," Charlie asked, coming over to talk. "They should be okay now. We put them out with a sleeping draft on the way here. Thought it might be better for them to wake up in the dark, and to quiet, but, like you saw, they weren't happy, not happy at all." "What breeds you got here, Charlie?" said Hagrid, gazing at the closest dragon, the black one, with something close to reverence. "This is a Hungarian horntail," said Charlie. "There's a common Welsh green over there, the smaller one a Swedish short snout, that blue-gray and a Chinese fireball, that's the red." Charlie looked around. Madame Maxim was strolling away around the edge of the enclosure, gazing at the stunned dragons. "I didn't know you were bringing her," Hagrid Charlie said, frowning. "The champions aren't supposed to know what's coming. She's bound to tell her student, isn't she?" "That's his thought. She'd like to see him," shrugged Hagrid, still gazing, enraptured, at the dragons. "Early romantic date," Hagrid said Charlie, shaking his head. "4. Said Hagrid, "So it's one for each of the champions, is it? What have they gotta do fight him?" "Just get past them, I think. We'll be on hand if it gets nasty, extinguishing spells at the ready. They wanted nesting mothers. I don't know why. But I tell you this, I don't envy the one who gets the horntail. Vicious thing. Its back end's as dangerous as its front, look." Charlie pointed toward the horntail's tail, and Harry and Izuku shuddered at the sight of long bronze-colored spikes protruding along it every few inches. "How's Harry?" "Fine," Hagrid replied, completely distracted. "Let's hope he's still fine after he's faced the slot," said Charlie grimly, looking out over the dragon's enclosure. I didn't dare tell Mum what he's got to do for the first task, she's already having kittens about him. Harry was shaking, pale and wide-eyed. Enough was enough. Arm wrapping about his waist, Izuku steered him away. He doubted Hagrid would even notice they were gone. The pair walked in silence, Harry's trembles twisting Izuku's insides. Hagrid hadn't thought this through. It was nice having a heads up, but he'd successfully scared the wits out of the teenager. Finding a secluded spot, Izuku got Harry to sit on a tree stump, removing the cloak and crouched down in front of him. "Hey, can you hear me, Harry?" "Dragons," Harry croaked out. "Merlin, Izuku. They want us to go against dragons. Even a fully grown wizard would have trouble. Are they aiming to kill us?" "Honestly, one would think so. Harry, we got this, okay? You're not alone. We just need to figure out good spells to keep you in one piece." Tears welled. "I don't want to do this, Izuku, I'm scared." Lurching up, Izuku gathered the boy against him. When Harry finally caved, the tears became broken sobs. All Izuku could do was hold him through the storm. Thanks for watching.